How old is this video? What happened? This is a very good point, what he's about to say.
No, you don't. You perceive a landscape of pre-categorized relevance that's dependent on your ethic. Jesus, it's so peculiar that.
This is a very... Where did this guy go? Where is he? Where is that Peterson at?
Interesting that in 2024, there are people who deny the philosophical wisdom of Jordan Peterson. Pre-Daily Wire Jordan Peterson.
That Peterson, that Shapiro, that Owens can say,
I am 99.9% sure, epistemically, on the roots of all of everything I believe, that you can do that 100% of the time on every issue. With a very well-known and mainstream manifestation of this disagreement, the debates over gender ideology and the answer to the question, what is a woman?
The question of what is a woman is just a retard's way of trying to get a gotcha because they're either too intellectually lazy to explore, like trans topics, or they're genuinely too retarded to understand how sophisticated or complicated language is. Any singular word is truly going to be pretty difficult to define when you're talking about the difference between universal categories of things versus particular things themselves. Just definitionally, these are incredibly difficult things to pin down.
Did you catch it? Listen to that last part again.
Any singular word is truly going to be pretty difficult to define when you're talking about the difference between universal categories of things versus particular things themselves.
Universals versus particulars.
Wait, I thought this guy was a retard. I didn't even know. Okay, never mind. Oh, maybe this will be like a substantive video. Plato's forms.
If there is one thing you take away from this video, it is understanding this fundamental philosophical dichotomy, and more importantly, how it structures the ongoing civil war between the left, who can be described as philosophical nominalists, and the right, who can be described as philosophical realists.
So the way that Dugin presents it in the book is that we have a medieval dispute among theologians and philosophers over the ontological status of universals. So if I say, for example, that here's a horse, there's a horse, okay, 3 horses. Now, only the particular horse exists, or does the category of horse also exist? Does the general category or the general grouping, the species or whatever the case is, the idea of the horse, does that also exist? So is a debate over the existence of universals. Are only particulars real, or are universals also real? And the idea here is that nominalism came down on the side that only particulars are real.
True.
That universals are a function not of what exists, but of what we say.
In the mind.
Nominalism suggests that universalism is a function just of the act of naming, in effect, that the only reality is the individual.
The nominalist philosophy, which is the philosophy that characterizes the left, claims that universal categories don't exist, only individuals in particulars. In other words, there is no objective...
No. No, that's completely wrong. Oh, no. Hold on one second. I feel like the difference between the left and the right is not the difference of universals or particulars, because, by the way, regardless of what a nominalist thinks or whatever philosophy nerds think, everybody believes in universals as being real things. Just as a quick thing, I'm going to give you a quick summary on a philosopher that I've never read about a topic that I've never formally studied. So take everything I say with mountains of salt, okay? I think there's an argument over whether or not, or there was an argument, or in philosophy, there's different schools of thought on whether or not universal forms exist. So, for instance, when we talk about a chair, there are particular chairs. I'm sitting in a thing we call a chair. That's a chair. There are chairs everywhere, okay? But does the universal concept of a chair, if every chair was destroyed, would there be the concept of a chair somewhere in some mind-independent manner, right? Not reliant on a human conceptualizing it, but just is there like a universal form of chair? Is that a real thing? And some people, I say some people, I don't know. I think this originates. I think this is like Plato's theory of forms or something. But who cares? He's a loser. The idea of a universal or a particular. Everybody believes in both of these things. People think that categories are real. People don't really question whether or not they're mind dependent or not. Like nobody actually thinks about any of this shit. Leftists believe in universals just as much as conservatives do. The leftist just defines the universal category in a different way. They don't reject the universal category. And this is evidenced by the fact that for instance, if leftists didn't care about redefining universals rather than just eliminating them, they wouldn't care what pronouns you use. The reason why they care about the pronouns is because they still believe in the universal category. They just want to expand or change it, right?
Just of the act of naming, in effect, that the only reality is the individual.
The nominalist philosophy, which is the philosophy that characterizes the left, claims that universal categories don't exist, only individuals in particulars. In other words, there is no objective reality to the concept or category of woman. There are only individuals who nominally identify with the word woman.
The answer you should be able to provide is what exactly is a woman? Well, for me, it's actually a really simple answer, and that's a person who identifies as a woman.
I don't know who that guy is, but he's an idiot. And whoever, I don't know if he was a professor or what. We watched that film, and that professor that Walsh was talking to is nonsense. You can never ever say that a thing is what if you identify as it. That doesn't, no word or anything ever works like that. With the exception, maybe, of categories that are explicitly just things that we want them to be what we say they are. So like a name, for instance, right? And that's about all I can think of. But yeah, my name is whatever I say my name is, because that's what I want you to call me. But even that isn't saying what a name. Wait, hold on. Oh. No, that's not actually true. Am I correct in saying that Wittgenstein said that every single problem of philosophy was actually just a misunderstanding of language? Does he say that? Because I just realized, hold on, I'm committing an error. I'm saying that a name is whatever you say the name is, but that's not true. You're not saying that the name, the category is whatever you say it is. You're saying my name, like in this category, this thing called a name, the thing that I want to be referred to is, and then you're doing a thing. You're not saying what a name is in the same way that you're saying what a woman is. It's not true. I committed that was a language error. I shouldn't say that anymore. I just realized that. Because when somebody says a woman is whoever defines themselves as a woman, a name is whatever you call yourself, those aren't the same thing. You agree what a name is. A name is a thing that you call somebody. You're not saying that a name is whatever you want it to be, but a name is whatever you want it to be. But when you say a name is whatever you want it to be, you're talking about like the content or whatever of what a name is. You're not talking definitionally about what a name is. So even though you're still using the same, what kind of verb is? Is it a, I don't remember what they're called. I don't think they're adverbs. What kind of verb is that? Yeah, it's you're saying a different thing. Does that make sense what I'm saying? My bad. We're going back to this. Okay.
The answer you should be able to provide is what exactly is a woman? Well, for me, it's actually a really simple answer, and that's a person who identifies as a woman.
But what are they identifying as?
As a woman.
So what is that?
As a woman.
Do you know what a circular definition is?
I do.
On the right, people who adopt a philosophical realist position would argue that there is an objective definition of woman and would put forward something like adult human female. Now, as you'll see by the end of this video, both of these
adult human female is a stupid description for woman, because female, you're still begging well, what is female, right? That's real. The fact that I think the easiest evidence of a person being a dipshit and not even considering the prompt is what is a woman? A female. Well, me, my friend. My God. The synonym master has shown up. Thank God we've been saved by, yes, true. Woman and female, these are synonyms for one another. Thank you.
sides are only partially correct, and the better perspective is the enlightened centrist one that people like pre-Coma, pre-Daily Wire Jordan Peterson have adopted. Postmodernists like Judith Butler, Michel Foucault, or Philosophy Tube occupy the extreme nominalist position, while religious fundamentalists like Muhammad Hijab or friend of the channel Andrew Wilson occupy the extreme realist position. Destiny, at least in this clip, seems to plant his flag firmly in the nominalist camp.
Sex for mammals exists outside of human understanding, though. No, it doesn't. That's not true. Sex is a category of things. No, there might be underlying facts, underlying matter or whatever, where animals might have particular things and go about in particular ways and create babies and all of that. But the categories of sex, these categorical things. So like my position would be that there are categories of things, but these are all mind-dependent things. Like we as humans create categories of things that other creatures might not. It's hard for us to imagine because we're people, but other creatures might not distinguish between like a rock and a plant or a leaf and a branch. I don't fucking know. Or a dick or some balls, right? But we do as humans. We create different categories because there's purpose in that. It helps us. There's utility. It makes sense. I need to be able to distinguish between an apple and dirt. If I'm trying to feed somebody, I have to create different words and categories because they provide utility to me and us when we're navigating the world and communicating with each other. I just don't think that these things are, I think these things are mind dependent. They don't exist somewhere. They're not a feature of the universe that humans are discovering, the universal form of an apple. We're just noticing patterns and then giving names to said patterns, and yeah. Things are ways that humans organize things on the planet. It's our way of like making sense of all. These universal categories don't exist outside of human understanding.
Like I said, there is some truth in this position, but if you take it to its logical conclusion, you end up making arguments like this.
But let's just use the example of water. Maybe we could agree that water is H2O. That was true even before we knew about chemistry. It was H2O. True. I'm sorry?
This isn't true.
That water has not always been H2O?
Yeah, all you have to do is cross the Mexican border. And over there, it's aqua. That's H2O, not water.
Aqua means water. Aqua is water.
It's a different term.
Actually, it's agua. It's not aqua, right?
And we're referring to terms and definitions here.
No, I'm referring to water. The stuff that fills lakes and rivers.
The stuff that
talking
fills
about the word water.
many things fill lakes and rivers.
Okay.
Again, the philosophical nominalist.
There was a miscommunication contextually happening here, but Vosh was kind of working his way towards something. I just don't know if he knows what. The professor was correct, but Vosh was working in a different context, but he was also just, yeah.
On the left do have a point. Objective universal categories are hard to nail down, especially when it's very easy to identify exceptions. Philosophical realists will claim that the definition of woman is adult human female, but then they will struggle to stay consistent with this belief when dealing with edge cases.
Transgender woman from Orange is the New Black.
I never watched that show.
I've never watched that show either, but she's on the cover of Time magazine.
Oh.
Or he's on the cover of Time magazine. Let's also put a picture of her by the mantle. Keep the kids away from the fire.
Yes.
Him. Shoot. Whatever. Z. I don't know. You can admonish me off the bat because I can't keep this straight.
Wait, but why can't he keep it straight? It should be incredibly obvious, right? Because he and she literally just mean chromosomes, right? You're never mixing those up, right? It should be really easy, no?
But these slip-ups aside, here's the inevitable problem that the left-wing nominalists face. If there are no objective universals, then our most basic categories that society depends on, like marriage or the nuclear family, are liable to be deconstructed into pure subjectivity.
Correct. But, well, well, I imagine we'll probably talk about this. I think I talked about it in like 2 hours. The issue is that this is a big issue that a lot of people have. Just because something is socially constructed doesn't make it arbitrary or meaningless, right? Like, football doesn't exist in the universe. It's not like a feature of reality, okay? But there are discrete, concrete rules about football. There are like, here are individual rules that we all agree on, and they have very particular, precise meanings. And you can even change these, right? There are different, number of downs between college football and professional football, right? There are differences that you can have, and you can change these theoretically at any point in time if you wanted to, right? Just because something is socially constructed, just because it's not like a feature of the universe, doesn't make it meaningless, doesn't make it not important, doesn't make it subject to arbitrary destruction at any point in time. If anything, you could argue that social constructs that arise out of human interaction are some of the most important things, arguably more important than matter, more important than the actual things in the universe, because we make decisions and we do, we decide things in our lives regarding these immaterial things sometimes, right? Like arguably the existence of God, if you're religious. Obviously, if I'm an atheist, I would say God doesn't exist, but God, even if you're religious, God is an immaterial thing. So yeah, the idea that people will say this, I'll say something like, oh, well, this is probably like a social construction. And I'll be like, oh, you think it's socially constructed, so it's not real, it's not important? It's like, well, hold on. Like Harry Potter isn't real. I really like Harry Potter. Excuse me, right? There's whatever.
When we start breaking down these basic...
Do you think an alien would not observe our species to have two genders the same way they would recognize even and odd numbers? I have no idea. I have no clue. They might. It might be that that having a binary gendered gametes would exist on every single planet. But I'm limited based on the life I understand. It's possible, I guess, life could exist in some other form that wouldn't even have gender distinctions, right? One interesting exploration of this concept is in the story Ender's Game. Basically, humans are at wars with these giant bug creatures, and they end up basically killing all the bug creatures. And in the course of this big war between humans and bugs, the bug queen creature realizes at some point during the war that like, oh, holy f***, we're like a hive mind, and killing like individual bugs to us is like cutting your hair. We could never have conceived that every single individual human has thoughts and feelings and emotions and conscious experiences. Like we never thought that. We just killed you all because we thought there was like one hive mind on Earth. And obviously, we wouldn't kill the hive mind on Earth. That would be crazy, cruel, and terrible. But we never imagined that individual humans would have consciousness, right? And then with the buggers, we would never consider the opposite, that like all of these things are connected to one central hive mind, or just killing a random things like cutting your fingernails or cutting hair or something. So I don't know. It's hard to, when you say like, well, would an alien conceive of this? There are some things that I would imagine we would all share concepts around. So like basic mathematical identities and truths, I would hope, and things like the periodic table of elements, I think. But it's hard to say. Really easy, no?
But these slip-ups aside, here's the inevitable problem that the left-wing nominalists face. If there are no objective universals, then our most basic categories that society depends on, like marriage or the nuclear family, are liable to be deconstructed into pure subjectivity.
When we start breaking down these basic central institutions, like the institution of the family and marriage, that's where the harm comes from.
We are rattling to the core heteronormative family structures. What they have to lose is the belief in their supremacy, their immutability, their necessity, their universality, and that is a big loss for them. But they're going to have to grieve that loss, and that's what we're telling them: grieve that loss and enter into a better world with the rest of us.
And the more that people believe, the more that we build a society where it's believed that marriage is objectively meaningless, right? It's entirely subjective. It's just not making you feel.
And this is where conservatives are kind of starting to try to make a comeback, but they haven't figured it out yet. Is if you want to argue for your social construct over somebody else's, you have to put forth positive arguments for it. You can't just rely on the fact that, well, it's been this way, so it won't change. And that's part of the reason why liberals won so much of the culture war. Although it's arguable to say if it's swinging back or not. But like, if you're just going to say over and over again, like, well, hold on, marriage is this way because it's always been this way and it's supposed to be. And then someone else is like, well, doesn't marriage kind of suck because it locks you as a woman out of basically doing anything interesting in your life? And now you've got birth control and jobs and college and you could travel the world, do all these cool things. Like, women look at that and they're like, okay, well, that actually seems pretty based. What did you guys say again? And the conservatives are like, well, marriage has always been this way and it can't change. Like, okay, well, it has changed. So something seems to be not adding up here in your guys' worldview. Yeah, you have to be able to put forth an argument to defend your particular social construction, your view of the world, which should be easy to do, especially for one that's lasted for so long. But a lot of people just kind of take it for granted, and liberals have done, everybody does this. We do this in the United States right now with democracy. We've taken it for granted, so we can't defend it anymore.
Feel better. The more that we build a society like that, I think that's where the harm comes in, the worse it is.
Reasonable people can disagree about the definition of marriage, but only the most ideologically possessed left-wing postmodern philosophical nominalists would argue that dissolving the nuclear family would produce better outcomes for children and society more broadly. It's statements like these that drive most of the justified reactionary sentiment on the right. And speaking of right-wing reactionaries, Destiny seems fully aware of the opposition to his ostensibly nominalist beliefs.
These are literally socially created concepts by humans. Language doesn't exist and categories don't exist outside of humans. Well, unless you think that there's a God that exists that creates categories of things. But then that's a whole other religious epistemic argument or whatever.
Okay, so how do you determine that anything is morally right or wrong? I do it from divine command. You do it from preference. I mean, you do it from divine command. What does that mean? Explain that. So this means that I follow Christian ethics. I use transcendental categories inside philosophy to create justifications for the values which come from God's laws. That's a lot of words to not say anything.
God, he's so stupid. God, Dave is so dumb. I don't understand how people look at. I do understand it, but like people, they say so many words that mean things, but then they don't mean anything that other people say. People will look at me and they're like, "Oh, Destiny's an idiot's idea of a smart person because he talks fast." I'm like, "What?" Dave is an idiot's idea of a smart person because he memorizes some facts, but he can't engage substantively on anything. I thought this P.F. Young guy was just like a memer and then kind of like dumb. That's what I do. I don't know why I thought that.
Command. You do it from divine command. What does that mean? Explain that. So this means that I follow Christian ethics. I use transcendental. I do it from divine philosophy to create justifications.
Yes, these transcendental categories, right? Transcendental. I think transcendental meaning like ontologically, it's above or separate than just material or matter-based things, right? A transcendental category can hold a concept like a universal, and I don't have to be able to see it somewhere in the world because it's metaphysically different or separate from the matter that we see and observe. And if you're a religious person, then you're probably more prone to believe in like objective universal categories existing in some other place or stored in some other realm, some other immaterial place because you're religious, because God lives there, right? So why couldn't things like good or evil or other things, these categories that are separate from our material understanding of the world,
for the values which come from God's laws. That's a lot of words to not say anything.
So it sounds like there's some sort of biblical scholarship that there are things like he believes in like the 10 Commandments, and that from these 10 Commandments and from your reading of Scripture and from the teachings of, I guess, whatever religious denomination he is a part of, that from there you can derive your moral oughts, whatever ethical principles that you ought to follow that are essentially coming from God, and then they're. Ooh, I really don't know if I like this or if you can do this. That good, because he's taking like. He's doing like the meta ethics are your universal, and then your particulars are like your applied ethics, when this is more of an is-ought distinction, but the is stored in some like transcendental arena. The is like in some immaterial place, and then the oughts are, whatever, we grant it. He drew a chart, so if he's going to do graphics, we'll give it to him. Expressed through, I guess, like Scripture or priestly teachings or whatever else.
This is a decent summary of the philosophical bedrock underneath right-wing ideologies like Christian nationalism. Philosophical realism posits that universal categories exist and are divinely inspired. God created man and woman in his image, therefore men and women are fundamentally objective and divinely inspired categories. God commanded men and women to get married, thus marriage is a objective, divinely inspired category. The problem with philosophical realism is fairly obvious. Even if objective categories did exist and were defined in a foundational religious text like the Bible or the Quran, there is no way to interpret, or in theological terms, exegete these foundational religious texts without applying a human, i.e. subjective, level of interpretation.
That's really not the claim that religious fundamentalists make. The claim they make is worse than that, because they claim that the Quran, say, or the Bible for that matter, is the literal word of God. But more than that, they claim that their understanding of that word is correct, which means they conflate two things. Like, because you could imagine a situation where you had a book, and I'm not saying this is the case, it's a matter.
How old is this video? What happened? What happened to his brain? Is this an old video? This is a very good point, what he's about to say, that language is so complicated. When somebody says the word of God is objectively true. I'm telling you something that is objectively true. There is a big distinction between you've snuck in a huge degree of subjectivity and you've tried to pass it off as objectivity. You're saying that's the word of God and the word of God is objectively true, but you're not saying that's the word of God and that's objectively true. You're saying my understanding of the word of God is objectively true and I'm passing that on to you. That's a much different statement. It's a far different statement. I think that's what Peterson is, I think, about to talk about. These two things are very, very, very different. Not that writing in the word of God is objectively true, but my subjective interpretation of it inherits some kind of objective truthfulness from it, right? Because that's objectively true. I can inherit that objective truthness and then convey it to you, but that's not true. There's a huge degree of subjectivity and interpretation of everything. Necessarily, you're subjective. You're, I think, right? Everything that passes through human experience is definitionally, I think, subjective, right?
Correct. But literal word of. They claim that the Quran say, or
this is from 5 years ago. You didn't substantiate how conservatives are begging the question when they say a woman is an adult human female, because woman and female are because woman and female are the words that we're trying to define, and using a word or a synonym of a word and definition for a word is oftentimes unsatisfying. When we're trying to say what is a woman, we're typically asking for some criteria or some things that substantiate, well, what is a woman, right? And if you just say, oh, female, well, you're restating it with another word. We're not really arriving at we're not saying anything meaningful there, right?
Literal word of God. But more than that, they claim that their understanding of that word is correct.
Adult, female, adult is the difference? No, it's not. No, it's not. And I refuse to believe that you actually think that. That was uttered in bad faith. You think when people are saying, what is a woman, the confusion they're having there is the age? You're wrong. You're lying or you're just stupid. The confusion about a woman isn't how old she is. So saying adult, human, female, the adult part is pointless. Like, oh, okay, well, then I guess what is a girl? Is that an adolescent human female? Also, the human is irrelevant. We don't have a problem distinguishing between human and non-human, right? So we're really talking about an adult female. We're not having a problem distinguishing age. That's not the question. The question is the ontological category of woman. What is the content of woman? What is that? What is within that, right? And to say, well, it's a female. Okay, well, what is a female? If you have content for female, then give that.
Literal word of God. But more than that, they claim that their understanding of that word is correct, which means they conflate two things. Like, because you could imagine a situation where you had a book, and I'm not saying this is the case, it's an imaginative exercise, where you had a book that had all the answers, that was extraordinarily complicated. And so that when you read it, it wouldn't be obvious that you understood it.
Why is XX chromosome not a satisfactory definition? You haven't elaborated on that. It can be a definition. That could be one you can use. That's fine. But the problem is that if you're conservative, you just can't engage with the question. You're so mind rotted that you're incapable of even considering any conversation here because there's too much at stake. You would have to admit to yourself that you've lived your life as a meandering, clueless retard, okay, that's wandering the planet, lost, okay, to the world of any type of intellectual thought to even admit that you might have to reconsider this. But for anybody who is in good faith wondering, if you want to say that, like, oh, a woman is an XX chromosome, right? Okay, now that's interesting that you would say that. However, let me draw an analogy, okay? We can go back to the professor that was arguing with Vosh. Well, if you say that a woman is an XX chromosome, what about when we go back 1,000 years and they had women? Women existed back then, right? But were there XX chromosomes back then? Did we have an understanding of chromosomes in the year 1000? In the year 1500? In 1000 BCE? In 5000 BCE? Like, no, we didn't know any of these things, but we still had women, we still had men. So it seems like there's something more going on in that. And in a day-to-day use, when we talk about women and men, it seems like we're talking about something more than just chromosomes, right? It seems like there's something more going on there. When you say, wow, that boy hits like a girl, are we saying, man, you are exhibiting X chromosomes right now? No, it seems like there's more content to these words, right? We're implying, some different level of physical strength, some different level of athletic capability, some different, there are other things. There's more content to these words. But conservatives are petrified of even engaging with that conversation.
Conflate two things, because you could imagine a situation where you had a book, and I'm not saying this is the case, it's an imaginative exercise, where you had a book that had all the answers, that was extraordinarily complicated. And so that when you read it, it wouldn't be obvious that you understood it. Or perhaps it wouldn't be obvious that you didn't understand it either. But you're not going to be able to you can't get an uninterpreted version of the book. And so the fundamentalist claim is far worse. It's that not only is there an absolute reality, truth, embedded in the book, but that their particular take on that absolute reality is the absolute take on that book.
So if the right-wing realists can't pin down objective truth, and the left-wing nominalists don't believe in universal objective truth,
that's a good analogy to it. I guess another analogy you could use is the 42 answer, right? There's a book called A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I think there's some sentient alien species builds like the best, smartest supercomputer in the world, and I think they ask it like, what's the meaning to life or something, and then the computer says 42, and everybody's like, wait, well, what the hold on, wait, what is that? They either ask it for an interpretation, like what does that mean, or they might ask like, well, what's a better question or something, and then the computer's like, okay, well, I need another 50 million years to actually calculate that. And it's like, okay, well, us, right? So in that case, the answer doesn't do anything for you because, I mean, so now it's up to your interpretation of the answer. Well, what the does that mean? Yeah.
On that book.
So if the right-wing realists can't pin down objective truth, and the left-wing nominalists don't believe in universal objective truth to begin with, who can we turn to for answers?
Unironically, I don't even know if he would stand by his answer because he's so unhinged now. Jordan Peterson actually gave the best answer on that documentary for What is a Woman. If you're not retarded, it's actually an insightfully correct answer, but I don't even know if Peterson knew how insightful or correct it was.
We've been journeying across the country asking people this question, and almost nobody can answer it.
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
Marry one and find out.
At this point, with the deterioration of his brain due to drugs and conservative mind rot, that is the answer, right? I think language arises through use. We say things and then we understand what other people are saying, and then through like common parlance and everything, we develop language like this. Yeah, this is what happens, right? Well, what is a particular thing? Well, I don't know. Go out in the world and engage with it, right? And then have some kind of like semantic understanding of the thing. Fill it with some content. Engage with the qualia, the likeness of the thing. Like, yeah, this is how you discover what things refer to. That's technically the use case is the correct answer. Peterson's answer is completely correct. Now, I don't know if he was saying that with any level of linguistic insight or any like philosophical understanding of what he's saying there about language, but that is how we discover what words are, what language means, how things are. It's as you use concepts and become familiar with them, and you have some sort of experience with them. This is how we develop language and vocabulary and communicate and vice versa. That is what it is. So if you want to know what a particular thing is, surely the only way to know what that thing is to go out and experience it.
Now, putting aside Destiny's proclivity to sound like an insecure teenage girl.
Haven't you literally said in a prior debate that any tribal man with no understanding of gender would be able to differentiate between female and male? Yeah, my guess is going to be that all throughout human history, without having any idea about gametes and anything like that, people will probably be able to distinguish between male and female, generally speaking. Generally. Now, there were some outfits in the 60s that might be kind of... No. Generally, yeah, every person will. Even young children can, without having any understanding of difference between like gametes or chromosomes. They do a little bit of like kind of sexual exploration stuff. That's it's not here or there. But I think we have pretty intuitive understandings of the different sexes.
I don't know if he was saying that with any level of linguistic insight.
His broader point about Peterson's philosophy is correct. Peterson is operating from a philosophical framework that I and many others would regard as the best philosophical framework. It's called pragmatism, and I will once again lean on my champion spotlights to explain. As an epistemological pragmatist, Jordan Peterson wields fundamental concepts like truth and God in ways that can be confusing.
I think that fundamentalists and atheistic scientists have the same problem. The fundamentalists make the proposition that biblical stories are literal representations of the truth.
But that's because their definition of woman was a vagina. There's more content there, my dude. There's more content. There's more content than just having the sex organs. Like, again, this isn't an argument that's given in good faith. You know this. We all know this. Every human intuitively knows that there are more ways to identify somebody as male or female than knowing their chromosomes, knowing their gametes, knowing the sex organs they have, than knowing any of that. We all know that. A lot of us should be able to look at how somebody text messages, and we can probably figure out like, this seems like a girl, this seems like a guy. Sometimes you can tell by the way that people text, not even hear their voice, right? There's way more content to these words. Male and female. Than just like chromosomes or shit like that or whatever. Hold on one second.
That might be true depending on what you mean by literal. But what they mean by literal, or what they attempt to make literal mean, is that they're in the same category as scientific facts, because they don't have the idea that there are different ways of approaching truth.
By the way, the argument you made was bad. Water was used as an expression before discovering water is H2O, and yet water was and still is H2O. You're wrong, but for reasons that I'm too lazy to get into. But water is colloquially probably a tad more broad than H2O. H2O is referring to a very particular, very specific molecule that there's a whole bunch of stuff that we would very easily and very quickly call water. This is water, without any more descriptors or anything, than just pure solid H2O and solo only H2O. That's not true. We call water a lot more than that. Now you might talk about like the H2O part is an essential part of whatever this thing is that we call water for it to be water. Sure, that's probably true, but it's a bit broader than just H2O. Which is what the professor guy was kind of getting at, and Vosh was stumbling into a little bit, but...
Truths can serve different purposes. They don't have a sense that your definition of truth is actually something like a tool, rather than an ontological statement about the reality.
You mean the solution that we call water, then? I believe a solution is something dissolved into something else. Is water considered a solution? Solution is when you make new molecules, right? Mixture is just when the things float together. Water is the molecule H2O, right? That we colloquially refer to as water. But if you look at but if you drink like a bottle of water and you and there's like minerals in it, you wouldn't say that like oh, I'm drinking water plus minerals, or I'm drinking water with a little bit more deuterium in it, or like so you know, you wouldn't say anything like that. You would just say, oh, it's just water. That's colloquially we refer to it as water.
Different purposes. They don't have a sense that your definition of truth is actually something like a tool, rather than an ontological statement about the reality of the world.
But Jordan, for example, knows like religious texts better, right? And he understands pragmatism, and that's philosophy I fully agree with. So like he understands that truth is like a deeper multidimensional word than correspondence to like facts, right? Or even honesty, just like blurting out what you think, right? Truth is a deeper thing. Like when Jesus says, "I'm the way, the truth, and life," he's talking more about like the arete, like you know what I mean, like the good, like almost like the pious, right?
Yeah.
Like the way to walk that works, right?
They might be predicated on pragmatic truths rather than objective truths. Pragmatic truths are truths that have functional utility.
You know, they believe that your knowledge was a tool. Knowledge was a tool to advance being in the world, let's say, survival in the world, and that you...
What else do we call water that isn't H2O? Everything you drink. I don't know. I think if you want pure H2O, I think you can buy that at places, but it'll be more expensive than ordinary. Do they sell this at... I'm trying to think of... what do they call this? Is it just... distilled water, I think. But even I think distilled water will come in different levels of purity. Remove more than 99.9% of minerals. Does this remove? Is it called deuterium? Is this the? I don't remember this dumb shit. Hydrogen 2 or heavy hydrogen is a stable isotope of hydrogen that is 1 proton, 1 neutron, and 1 electron. What does hard water have more in it? What am I thinking of? Is hard water H2O with a deuterium isotope instead of hydrogen? I don't remember. Hold on. Yes, it is. Okay. It's a form of water whose hydrogen atoms are all deuterium. Okay. So water that is heavy water, you will still call H2O, or you'll call it water, even though it's not technically like H2O. Because you're dealing with isotopes here. And then also water, like it's funny because distilled water is more H2O than a thing you would call water, right? But you would think that like water must be water and distilled water is something else. But if water is H2O, distilled water is more H2O than just water is H2O. Right? This is what I mean. I'm just saying that like, I don't know why this isn't an argument. I'm just asking you to think a little bit more about the words that you say. Like, I'm not wrong on any of this. Like, none of this is even, you can't even argue from your side that this is correct. Like all of these words, this is how we use language. You don't learn language. None of you have ever in your life, well, unless you literally go to a dictionary, you don't go to the dictionary to learn words. You hear what people are saying around you. You look at the things that they're referring to, and then you fill that language. You fill those words with content, okay? Some mom keeps saying like, oh, cup, 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 cup. And every time mom says cup, she brings me something that she can hold in her hand and put something else in. Okay, I guess that's a cup, right? You're hearing something syntactically, you're getting a word, and then you're filling that with content from the world. Oh, this is a cup, that's a cup. Oh, that's a chair, that people are saying, oh, chair. This is how things develop. So when somebody asks you, well, what is a thing, right? Well, you give a general description of like, well, what is the content of this thing, you know? What is it like? What do we do with it? What is the purpose of this thing? But for some reason, not for some reason, they have to because they're so religiously tied to the idea. But then we're like, okay, what is a woman? What does it mean? X chromosome with female gametes, hyper-specific sexual definition. Bro, nobody in the history of all of fucking mankind, unless you're like in a laboratory, okay? Nobody is actually asking this question and answering it this way, right? There's tons of things that we think of. When we think of women, we think of men. Men tend to be taller, tend to be stronger, tend to have sometimes coarser skin, They like fashion-wise, they wear different clothes. They wear their hair in different ways. They might have different types of jewelry. They might speak in different ways. Their voices are different pitches. Like, yeah, just the idea of like, the idea that you would answer in such a hyper autistic way when none of our understanding of language works that way is just so, it's just so goofy. But I mean, I say goofy, but people do it just because they have like this adherence to this, it's gotta be this way.
You justified your knowledge not because you had final knowledge of anything, but because your tools were good enough to obtain the end that you were aiming at. That was the validation process. If your theory was good enough to get you to where you were aiming, then it was true enough. And the pragmatists believed that that was the best that you could do with truth.
That is how we discover what words are, what language means, how things are. It's as you use concepts and become familiar with them, and you have some sort of experience with them. This is how we develop language and vocabulary and communicate from person to person.
Truth is not an object that exists independent of human consciousness, nor is it subjective to the point of infinite malleability and deconstruction. Truth is a transjective tool, and the purpose or usefulness or meaning of that tool exists in between the objective world of facts and objects and the subjective world of motivation and experience.
Meaning is like the graspability. Remember I talked about optimal grip? It's like the graspability of that cup. Is that in me? No. Is it in the cup? No, because a fly can't grasp it. Well, graspability is in my hand. Well, I can't grasp Africa. No. There is a real relation, fittedness, between me and this cup. Same thing with the adaptivity of an organism. Is the adaptivity of a great white shark in the great white shark? Drop it in the Sahara, it dies. Meaning isn't in me. I think that's romantic bullshit. And it isn't in the universe. It is a proper relationship. I've coined the phrase transjective. It is the binding relationship between the subjective and the objective.
The usefulness of a key is not a property of the key itself, but a transjective interaction between the key and a given lock. The infectiousness of a virus is not a property of the virus itself, but a transjective interaction between the shape of the spike protein and the receptors it binds to. So when Destiny says you can't see a chair, he is correctly pointing out that we do not see objective universal categories that exist independent of human beings. Instead, we see a landscape of tools and obstacles, the meaning of which is a transjective property that emerges from the interaction between the objective facts and the goals and motivations of the individual perceiving them. To put it poetically, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
The classic scientific idea is something like you perceive a universe of facts and derive conclusions and act. It's like,
that's so dumb. He's going to say the opposite, right? You actually have your normativity doesn't come after the fact. You have normativity and you use that normative, that subjectivity to interpret the universe around you.
no, you don't. You perceive a landscape of pre-categorized relevance that's dependent on your ethic. Jesus, it's so peculiar that.
This is a very...
Where did this guy go? Where is he? Where is that Peterson at?
That's dependent on your ethic. Jesus, it's so peculiar that.
This is a very different way of looking at the world than a scientist or a computer might. Peterson actually gives a great example. Imagine you get an envelope with some important news in it. Scientifically, objectively, the envelope is a rectangle of paper and it has ink molecules printed on it, but that's not how you experience it. This envelope contains your past, your future, your test results, maybe the rest of your life. You experience it not just as an object, but as something with values and meaning.
Now look, let's be honest here. This shit is complicated. And if you've made it this far in the video and you're still confused because you're like, we see objects. I don't get how we don't see objects. That's fine. There's two things you should take away from this video. Number one, Destiny is probably autistic, which means he's very good at curating and applying lots of individual facts. But if he's not going to shore up his underlying metaphysics and philosophy, he's not going to be able to grasp at the important patterns that emerge from those facts. The other key takeaway is that truth is not just some subjective phenomenon based on language games, and it's not this purely objective phenomenon that only religious fundamentalists have access to. If you want to know what's true, the best thing you can do is just accept everything I say uncritically. Also, when CJDX releases his 5...
What a retarded statement. If you want to understand what's true, okay, you need to accept everything that I say uncritically. If you just conceded that you can say that H2O is an essential aspect of the concept of water, why do you not concede that an XX chromosome is an essential aspect of a woman? Like, do you understand how you're talking? Like, at any point in this conversation, have I conceded that H2O is an essential aspect of the concept of water? Like, did you have to argue or debate that out of me? Like, you're not engaged in an actual, like, good faith exploration of the topic. You just have a preconceived thing of like, this has got to be this fucking way, bro, or I'm gonna fucking lose it. And then you're doing whatever you can to cram everything into that box. Chill. My God. I'm sorry, Destiny. Can you explain to me what Jordan said there? What Jordan said was, what we assume is that we go into the world as empty blank slates and we look at facts, and then from those facts we derive meaning based on our exploration. What he's saying is that actually the second you open your eyes, you are a subjective entity with certain senses that have been a priori granted to you based on your brain or God, and that from these things, you're already valuing certain things before you've even gathered any information about the world, right? So for instance, when I'm looking at the world, like here's an easy example. When I look outside, am I doing an objective collecting of electromagnetic radiation from the world? No. My eyes are already heavily biased. I can only see a small section that we call visible light. So even when I open my eyes and I look outside, I'm already heavily biased against what exists in objective reality. I'm already heavily biased. I can only see a sliver of the type of electrons, I guess the wavelength or whatever of electrons that are bouncing around outside. So I'm already completely fucked there, okay? When it comes to hearing things auditorily, I mean, we just watched a video yesterday of how there's, that's all I'm saying. You're as a subjective creature, you're already heavily biased entering the world before you've even made any factual analysis at all in terms of how you're perceiving things around you, all right? But to have a functioning society, we can start with subjectivity, but we need to rely on objective facts to move forward. Sure, hopefully, in any well-functioning society, when you refer to a thing, when you create some category of thing, hopefully there's a referent there that you're referring to something real or something true. There should be some underlying fact of the matter, right? So when I say chair, hopefully there's like matter that we're referring to. Everything should have some kind of reference to reality. Otherwise, what the fuck is even fictional terms are referring to something, right? Harry Potter is not a real person, but when I say it, there's a reference there to an actual some kind of fictional concept that we all agree with and understand. Same thing with man or woman. When we say man or woman, we're referring, there is some underlying, this is the content that I'm talking about. The content, there must be some content here that we're referring to, some matter that gives us some understanding or familiarity with a thing or whatever, right? What are we referring to when we say man or woman? It depends on the context, but I mean, historically, like broadly speaking, we are a sexual dimorphic species. Men tend to exhibit a whole bunch of different traits. Women tend to exhibit a whole bunch of different traits. We're pretty heavily sectioned along our sexual gametes. Generally, men are the ones pumping the semen. Women are the ones pumping the babies out. And then we've got a whole bunch of traits, especially through puberty, the secondary sexual characteristics that develop. And then we also have different temperaments that we develop. As a result, we have different roles in society. These are like all the things that go into the content that we fill in when we talk about man or woman. All of these things are part of being a man and being a woman, right? And we all know this. All of you know this intuitively. You don't want to accept it because you want to debate this until you fucking die. But like, you know this intuitively. When every young boy, what does it mean to become a man, right? Well, becoming a man is when the secondary sexual characteristics are expressed through the increased production of androgen due to your XY chromosome. Nobody thinks that. Nobody says that. Nobody intuitively grasps that. That's not true, right? What does it mean to be a woman? Well, actually, a woman is like, some women don't feel as womanly when they have small boobs. They feel like they're not as much a woman, or if they get treated a certain way. Like these are words that we fill with content, and these are highly complicated. Complicated is the wrong word. There's a lot of content in these categories of man and woman. What is this? Yes, you can say that H2O is an essential aspect of water. Oh, so you can surely say that XX chromosome is an essential aspect of a woman. Destiny, insert strawman voice. XX chromosomes don't really have anything to do with being a man or a woman in terms of the content that we filled those in. XX chromosomes tend to rather produce all of the things that we're familiar with when we think of what a woman is. XX chromosomes tend to produce somebody who probably has smoother skin, different fat distribution, different sexual gametes, vagina, ovary, whatever. Like that tends to come from XX chromosomes. And from XY chromosomes, we tend to get a lot of the content that we fill in our brains of what is a man, right? However, there's an issue, and all of you conservatives just learned this, because when you guys all ran into the female boxer, the Iman girl, now all of you guys are like, wait a second, hold on. Maybe she can get pregnant. Maybe she has a vagina, but hold on. She has XY chromosomes. That's a man, okay? Like, none of you actually think that's a man. You now all of a sudden your brain has entered like the quantum world. We're like, oh fuck, like oh shit, my preconceived notions of just the chromosomes mattering are being challenged radically right now so much. But the reason why your mind is getting fucked is because in some ways, assuming she even does have X-ray chromosomes, we still don't actually know, by the way, but a DSD individual or somebody like this represents a significant challenge to where it's like, okay, well, let's imagine that you changed the chromosomes, but every other feature remained the same, right? Let's say that you changed XX chromosomes into XY, but every single other part of the person remained the same. Would you now say that woman is a man? No, you probably wouldn't, right? So it seems like there's some other content there that's determining how you would say somebody's a man or woman. Something else is happening there. Just be aware of it. Now, typically XX and XY chromosomes, again, they tend to produce all of the things and the content that we would call as man or woman, but would you say that male and female have a similar amount of content to them as man or woman? Those have strict scientific definitions, right? No, they don't. That's a conservative delusion that was just invented where conservatives are like pretending all of a sudden that female and woman are actually completely and totally distinct words from each other. And in history, we understand that female is a scientific and male is... That's bullshit. No, that's not true. Plenty of people have used man or male colloquially. Plenty of people have used woman or female colloquially. That's the idea that there's some like hardcore, rigid, strict difference between like male and man and female and woman that's just like a newly invented delusion for conservatives to cope through whatever arguments that they want to make. Male robot is the obvious example. Lympheo. Everyone knows C-3PO is a male robot and he has no biological functions. True. Are you saying there should be different terminologies for someone who born biologically male or female and someone who embodies the content of perceived values of man or womanhood? Probably not, because these line up like 99% of the time. Or 99.9% of the time or whatever. Generally, most of the time, you're the content of, whatever you exhibit is going to come pretty reliably from your chromosomes, like generally. It's pretty safe in making those assumptions usually. Or 98.9 or 99. I don't know what the intersex, whatever bullshit. But the conservative argument is that the 1% is not enough to redefine or broaden our understanding of the category. Yeah, okay. If you want to argue in favor of the category, then you defend the category on the merits, not on the existence of the category, right? So if you come into an argument screaming, women actually means XX crimes, kill yourself. You're not making a real argument. That's not why we chose those categories, right? We don't have women's sports and men's sports because XX chromosomes are existing, XY chromosomes. That's not why we have it. We have it because people with XX chromosomes tend to be a lot weaker physically or less capable of competing physically, but we want to create athletic environments for them to participate in, right? That's why we have women's sports. It's because we want women to be able to look and see other women competing at the height, at the apex of whatever a female body can produce athletically. And so we want to create a protected space for them to compete because that'd be cool, because it's good, because everybody should be able to compete. And if you come at it from that perspective, and somebody says, well, should trans women be allowed to compete with cis women? You'd say, I don't think so. I think it threatens that category. Because all the research shows that just because you transition and you start taking hormones, it doesn't seem like you're still like fit neatly into that prior understanding of why we've created this particular category. And then you're done. That's the end of the argument, right? I didn't have to appeal to X chromosomes or some weird. I can speak about the content of the definition. I can say definitionally, this is why women's categories exist. This is what women means in this context. This is why we've created it. And if we introduce this expanded definition of woman in this circumstance, we've kind of defeated the purpose of the category. And there, now you're done. Now you've made a meaningful argument with substance and context, okay? And semantic fulfillment. You've added content to the word, and then you argued the content and the meaning of the content, rather than just saying, well, actually, it's the X chromosome is, that's why it's to have to think. No one sees an XX chromosome. What the fuck are you talking about? How would this Iman woman have made it so far if you could see fucking chromosomes, if you think she is truly XY? Okay. Man, what a waste of time today. Fuck! We've only streamed for 3 hours. Do you think there is any brave, popular conservative who is good faith compared to others? I don't know if they're out there. I haven't seen them yet. I will say in advance, the biggest trigger that I have is all these conservatives, all of you fucking losers are going to pretend it too, are going to pretend like they always hated Trump. And they always, if Trump loses again, oh my God, it's going to be the Iraq War 2.0. Wow, we never should have invaded that. I was against that the whole fucking time. This is a horrible idea. Donald Trump, yeah, that guy was crazy. And I never, all these fucking content creators are going to say it. All these conservative pundits are going to say it. It feels like you're just appealing to your own understanding of the category as a given, but this argument has gone on too long, so it's okay. No, what I'm saying is something that I'm just saying what you all know to be true, but you might not be able to access your intuitions right now because you're so debate-brained on this topic. But what I'm saying is true. Plenty of societies throughout all of human history, before knowing what a gamete was, before knowing what a chromosome was, before knowing any of this, was able to very easily and very quickly define and talk about and add content to the words of man or woman. None of them needed to talk about chromosomes. None of them even needed to talk about, you can talk about reproduction, but you don't need to. Plenty of people can talk about the difference between a man and a woman, okay? If you're a Catholic and you do confirmation and a girl is becoming a woman, none of that has to do with your chromosomes. A boy becoming a man, if you do a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, if you do a quinceañera or whatever the fuck else, none of these things are like, oh yeah, well, just so you know, your father and mother today, they did a chromosome test and my God, today you're an adult human female. None of that has to do with it. The content that we feel is so much broader than that. It's so much different. And you know this, all of you know this, because none of you have ever used these definitionally in your entire life. You've never, ever used man or woman to refer to chromosomes, ever. You've never done that, ever. You've never used feminine or masculine to refer to you're always talking about content. Always. Okay. Is it not useful to draw a distinction between women, female, or gender, sex for categorization purposes, with sex, female referring specifically to biological features respective of the group? Maybe, sure. Depends on what you're talking about, but sure. In like a medical environment, you sure as fuck would want to know. For birth control, you really want to know, right? So what if a conservative said a woman is someone who shows feminine traits naturally? I think I would disagree with that definition, but we could have a very substantive conversation. That definition is way more on track to being a good definition of woman than adult human female. That definition is you're way more in the right direction than adult human female. At least that person's trying to engage with it in a meaningful way. Hi, what's up, babe?
Good, sir.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I appreciate being called babe like 5 times over the course of our conversation.
Have I called you babe that much?
At least 3. At least 4.
I'm sorry.
I appreciate it. Well, listen. I appreciate your extremely positive response to my most recent video, number 1, that I saw you reacting to earlier.
It was okay.
It is still interesting that in 2024, there are people who deny the philosophical wisdom of Jordan Peterson. Pre-Daily Wire Jordan Peterson.
I mean, I think he was good at speaking. I think he was relatively insightful. But man, it's hard listening to him now. Taking anything he says before seriously. Or I could understand why somebody might hear him now and be skeptical that anything he said prior to the brainworm stuff was worth listening to. But
yeah, I understand that too. Post Daily Wire Peterson is the worst. But it sounded like you were not even aware that those lectures existed. Like the point about what do you call it? Fundamentalists have a literalist interpretation of the Bible and they think that their interpretation is therefore correct, even though they have subjectivity.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that particular thing, but I know he said a lot of stuff that's insightful. Like I give him a lot of credit for. I think prior to 2017, whenever the C16 stuff started, is when he started to head off in that direction. But prior to 2017, 2018, he generally has some pretty good stuff to say. Yeah,
I would agree. I would say it's been certainly fundamentally transformative for me, at least. And I suspect. Have you watched his lectures and his interviews, or
yeah, some of them? But
or is it mostly his political takes?
I would say
the interviews, the lectures in particular.
Over the past couple years, mainly his political stuff, but in the in the past, I've watched some of his. He's got a lot of material out there. I've seen a decent amount, but I'm sure there's more that I haven't seen than I have seen.
That's fair. Well, great. Is there anything that you want to talk about in particular?
Well, not necessarily. Wait, was I supposed to bring the topics? I thought you had something you want to talk about in particular.
Well, I was, like I said, I was watching your reaction. The whole point about pragmatism and people being too autistically focused on definitions.
Sure.
You yourself pointed that. I was laughing, by the way, as soon as the video ended. Someone can timestamp the reaction, but you said something like, as soon as I concede that H2O is part of water, it's officially, I've conceded the debate. Something women.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good.
Thank you. I think a lot of my arguments come off as autistic because I'm usually critiquing the other side. But one of my central complaints for a lot of these conversations is that you never actually get to any good conversation ever. So people will hear me give a counter to something and they'll think that because they instantly assume that my position is completely, totally on the other end. So there is no good conversation. So for instance, I can understand how you can listen to probably even a decent number of my arguments and come away thinking that, Stephen thinks that there is no value in socially constructed things, or that if you can't discretely analyze some piece of matter under a microscope, it has, no meaning and no value and it doesn't matter. But on the contrary, I argue like social constructions are probably the most important things in our lives. Individual bits and pieces of matter and individual groupings of things aren't as important as like the social phenomenon of Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, or, huge rites of passage for young children becoming adults, or, things like marriage or any of these things. And yeah, these are, I don't think marriage is a feature of the universe. I think it's probably a largely constructed, relationship category, but I think it's an incredibly important thing. So, but you never get to have those conversations because I think that the other side is so down in the weeds on some dumb shit. And then to try to move them out of that is the only part of the conversation I'm ever capable of having. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Did you like the point about transjectivity? Or did you kind of zone out there at the end?
Transjectivity. Wait, was that like a joke at the very, very end, or?
No, it's not a joke. It was the last 1 minute or so. It was the resolution of the whole problem of subjective versus objective, universals versus particulars. And I agree that dichotomy is simplified to some degree, but truth is not objective, truth is not subjective, truth is transjective. It's an interplay between the object and the subject.
Oh.
And so it's like, well, is marriage fundamental category, is a universal category? It's like, well, it all comes down to utility and pragmatism, which is sort of in line with Wittgenstein, which is, I believe, someone that you're vaguely familiar with. Did you have a Wittgenstein arc or something?
Nope. I've just had some people say this sounds like Wittgenstein, so I say, oh yeah, this does. But I've never read anything by him, so.
That's fair. Are you? J.J. McCullough told me not to have a philosophical conversation, but I'm inclined to do the opposite.
Wait, with me or in general?
Yeah. Well, just in general.
Oh,
J.J.
okay.
hates philosophy.
That's good. Based, true. Fuck philosophy.
Well, that's the thing. Well, one of the key tenets of my worldview is anti-intellectualism is based, which is why I produce the League of Politics videos instead of, all this Wikipedia research stuff.
Okay. What does anti-intellectualism mean to you?
It means exactly what you just said. JJ is based for not caring about philosophy.
Okay. When I say JJ is based for not caring about philosophy, what is your interpretation of that? What do you think I mean when I say that?
Philosophy is largely a bunch of semantic disagreements between people who have a very autistic view of the world.
Okay. I say it a little bit, but I say it a bit tongue in cheek. Philosophy has a lot of important concepts.
Surely when I say anti-intellectualism is based, I also say.
Okay, sure. Well, but that's not. I can't say surely you mean that because there are some people that literally.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess just to step back, how familiar are you with my channel? Because I was one of the more interesting moments of when you were reacting to my video. I think it was towards the beginning. You're like, "Oh, I thought this guy was retarded. He actually knows what he's talking about." So what are you familiar with?
Well, I've seen your league stuff, which is very good. I think you could have been a really big content creator if you would have existed 8 years ago, when the League of Legends subreddit was blowing up and league memes and all that were happening. The Sky Williams and all the other shit was out there.
That's right, Sky Williams.
Yeah, Trick 2G and
Riven
all
Main, Diamond.
Yep, all the stuff, all the good memes back then.
Is it not as popular anymore?
I don't think so. No. I feel like careers were made in that League of Legends subreddit, but it feels like that stuff is not as popular anymore. Yeah.
Well, in some sense, I'm those videos appeal to the what do you call it? The knowledge base that people had from playing League. You can make very strong metaphor. League is complicated enough where it's a rich enough world where you can draw, interesting metaphors and whatnot, like a toggle ability, for example. That type of stuff is people have that knowledge base, and then doing the video game analogies, drawing from that knowledge base, whether or not it's popular.
Sure.
I'm just trying to make the best points that I can.
No, yeah, I understand. I'm just saying that when League was more popular and people were watching things, it would have been a higher chance of like getting more people to engage. But no, I understand what you're saying.
That's fair. Well, I'm talking to you right now.
True. And then I think we had a political conversation at one point, and the only thing that stuck in my mind was like, oh, this guy's like every side is the same and everything is the same and epic. And I'm like, okay, well. And 99% of the time, those people are fucking retarded, so,
Yeah, I was going to say that perception of me is as accurate as someone like Anthony Fantano's perception of you. How about that?
Wow. Okay.
Okay, well, because I guess, first off, I saw you reacted, I posted your reaction to my video, the Destiny Champion Spotlight. Did you feel it was a fair representation of you?
I thought it was pretty funny, yeah. In terms of fair representation, I mean, it depends.
Not funny. Obviously, it was funny. Everything I do is what I want it to be. Hilarious.
Sure.
But
when we do comedy and humor, when we say, was it fair? I mean, I have to dive a lot into what the joke is when you're saying it versus how I would interpret the joke versus how I think your audience would interpret the joke versus your understanding of all those interpretations. So, like, if I'm in front of two audiences, like I could, I think all of these are different. So I could say something like, Donald Trump just became president, and he finally got to enact his Muslim ban. So no more Muslims in the country anymore. Based that Donald Trump got rid of all the Muslims, finally, based. If I were to say that in front of a left-leaning audience, they would laugh because Donald Trump and banning Muslims is evil and crazy, and the fact that he would like do that so blatantly, that would be like the joke. If I said it in front of a conservative audience, they would laugh because they think it's genuinely cool that he did it, and he's like being so open and outward about it. And then so when I'm saying it, like whatever my intention is, like depending on who I'm in front of and how they interpret it, like all of these things. So all of this to say that when you ask me, was it fair? There are interpretations where everything you said was fair, and there are interpretations where I would staunchly disagree, but I'm not familiar enough with you or your audience to know how I would interpret those things.
That's fair. Did you think it was an accurate representation of reality to have the Dr. Destiny, Mr. Borelli toggle?
Maybe. I would have to go back and watch it particularly. I don't remember coming away thinking like, God, that was just he's so wrong, like being upset about it. So yeah.
You were, I think you were distracted while you were reacting to it, which is
wow.
That's okay. I forgive you.
Well,
you go back and watch.
Okay.
But like the point of those. I mean, you agree that comedy has to be in contact with reality, right?
Not only do I agree with it, every single person agrees with this. People don't realize sometimes that they agree with it because they get into literally autistic arguments. But yes, comedy has to have some reference to reality. Otherwise, it's not fucking funny. I find most often people will say things like, it's just a joke when they don't want to acknowledge like the underlying connection or something. But yeah, of course, for sure. Comedy has to have some connection to reality, yeah.
Yeah, and the degree to which something is funny is definitely parameterized by the degree to which it's true. Because if you try to make like a propagandistic joke, it falls flat immediately.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Yeah. And especially when you're doing parody and satire based on League of Legends, right? Like if you can show something that's true about me and true about like top lane or something in League at the same time, right? That's like an extra
or
funny.
to use, like I was saying with the toggle ability, like that's a mechanic that people understand and you can toggle back and forth. I guess my question is, because you are one of the more significant figures in the online political space, I guess I'm curious to understand sort of your approach to things, how you see things, the degree to which I guess you're aware of the criticisms that people have of you and the degree to which you have a great deal of strength. Like, for example, your passive Cult of Destiny. Obviously, as fans of cult-based and stuff like that, it's like, okay. Jordan Peterson, surely not immune from that criticism. I don't think anyone of any level of what do you call it? Notoriety is immune to that criticism. But the point I was making is you, and I'm curious if you think this is true, you canvassed for, was it Ossoff and Warnock? Was it both of them? Or was
Yeah,
it
in
just one of
Georgia.
them?
Yeah. Originally, it was just
Both elect-
Ossoff because I didn't want to do Warnock because I don't like black people. But then I was like, I should probably do both. So, yeah.
This is good comedy.
Thank you.
So I don't recall. I didn't follow it too much, but it was a razor thin runoff. It was a runoff, so naturally it had to be razor thin. And you did a bunch of canvassing down there.
Yeah.
So, what do you think is the probability that you single-handedly flipped those seats for the Democrats, which then in turn flipped the entire Senate for the Democrats?
I think we had a guy that went through and did a numbers analysis, and I don't think it was close enough for that to have been the case. I think that we definitely impacted the districts that we canvassed in. It seemed like we did. But I think that even though it was close, I don't think it was close enough that I could say that, like, oh yeah, I think we single-handedly were the reason why we won this.
Well, that's why I put single-handedly. Obviously, nothing can be single-handedly.
Sure.
But
Or what I mean is that, like, absent our efforts, looking mathematically at the votes that possibly we affected through our canvassing, if you removed all of those, I think they both would have still won.
well, obviously, that's fair. You can't know that for sure, right? So
What I'm saying, okay, so let me, to be more precise.
Probabilistically.
Well,
what is the percent chance that you made a fundamental difference? Like 5%?
What I'm saying is that I think we
0?
compared like the districts before and after the runoff and the areas that we canvassed in to see how many votes more we think we got based on our canvassing efforts. In the areas that we canvassed, we removed all the extra votes that we think might have been attributed to our campaigning based off of the prior results. Even with those removed, I think they still would have won. That's what I mean when I say I don't think that we affected the outcome. But I mean, it's possible it could have been more significantly swayed one direction or another. But
that's what I'm saying. What is the probability, if you had to put a percentage, the probability that you made?
That we were that absent us we would have lost.
Or like 10%?
I would say easily under 5, probably under 1 or 2% would be my guess.
Okay. Which, still having a one out of 100 chance to affect the entire political structure of the United States is not insignificant.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess just more broadly on that, do you plan on doing more? I mean, you did canvassing recently. If you didn't think it would, would you say it was a success?
Yeah, for sure. But you don't always know. I don't always know, like, the impact. This is a retrospective, right? Like,
yeah.
I can't know prospectively if this would be the difference or not, yeah.
Is your plan to do more canvassing on, like, tough elections? I know you did.
Probably, yeah.
In Ohio or something?
Yeah. Got a couple events coming up, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's admirable. But that's my point about, cult of destiny. Rally your followers to go actually make a tangible difference in the world.
Yeah.
And so the Dr. Destiny, Mr. Borelli thing, it's like, it's a fairly straightforward question.
Okay.
Are you aware of the degree to which you undermine your own goals?
Probably not. But I think that there is a little bit of begging the question, I would imagine here.
What are your goals?
Yeah, exactly. Because typically when people say you're undermining your own goals, that usually means more that their perception of what my goals are is probably different than my perception of what my goals are. So they view me as undermining what they think my goals are rather than me undermining what I think my actual goals are. I think there are times where I undermine my goals for sure.
Yeah.
But sometimes I don't think it's when other people say like, oh, you're ruining yourself this way. I'm like, I don't think so. Maybe something that you would want, but not something that I'm looking for.
That's fair. Well, that's probably what you just described is probably the camp I fall in, my perception of your goals. Because the way I see it, the point of that joke was Dr. Destiny. In Dr. Destiny mode, I mean, you are... these are, I would say, objectively true.
Oh, objectively, okay.
One of the...
Sorry, go ahead.
To the same degree that Jordan Peterson is objectively one of the best philosophers of all time.
Gotcha.
Maybe transjectively true, let's say.
Transjectively true, okay.
Clearly one of the most intelligent people on this platform. You're capable of extreme empathy. You are able to have basically any conversation with anyone, which I think, like, for example... Obviously, this all went sideways, but like your conversations with Nick Fuentes, had they been able to continue, and whatever, all kinds of things went wrong with that were sort of outside of your control. It's like I would say those are objectively good. Those are objectively good de-radicalizing conversations that bring people back from the edge. You're on the left. I think you do I think you fulfill an important role of stopping people who would otherwise be in like Hassan's camp from going to Hassan's camp, right? Because you can clearly state like, of course I'm not for banning the ability of transgender people to get the surgery or whatnot, but that doesn't mean I'm now a socialist or whatever, right? So you fulfill an important function, and at your best, you know, you are a very useful tool for many people in figuring out the truth. Like my background, for what it's worth, I was a big fan of Jordan Peterson.
Noticed, yeah.
Yeah, as you can tell.
Yeah.
To the point where I would say, unironically, I literally don't disagree with him on anything, because the things that he would be wrong about, he himself acknowledges and he qualifies, and he's like, well, I don't know if this is true, but blah, blah, blah. So I was like, he's literally 100% right. There's almost nothing I disagree with him on. I see now in hindsight the limitations of that.
Sure. I mean, I feel like, broadly speaking, pre like C16 stuff, I think I would probably agree. I don't know if I've seen anything of his where I'm like, oh, he's super wrong. Generally, he would match his conviction with the statements he was making, usually.
You didn't see anything where he was super wrong? How about when you talked to him and he said...
I said prior to C16, the whole Bill C16 shit, before that. After that, I think he's off. And
I think, okay, well, I would say Daily Wire is the key.
Sure, okay, yeah.
The Kathy Newman interview was post Bill C16, and Kathy Newman interview is Peterson at its best, in my opinion.
Okay,
but anyway, my point
I disagree,
is,
but go ahead, yeah.
That's fair. Well, we can get into that. But like, my point is, you talking to him and then having him say, what did he say? Well, there's 20% excess deaths in Europe. It's like, okay, and you can just say qualitatively that this is because of the vaccine. He's like, well, what do you think it is? It's like, the whole Kathy Newman interview, his famous line, or one of the lines was like, you never do a univariate analysis when you're talking about like the gender pay gap.
Yeah.
It's like, you just did a univariate analysis. How embarrassing, how cringe univariate analysis. And it's like, well, okay, you're very good at, you know, pushing back and getting people to, what do you call it? Prove that they don't know what they're talking about. And like the other one, the Twitter files debate, I think you were doing some end of the year like recap.
Sure.
And it was like, I think your audience like votes on best meme, best debate or something like that. The best meme was the one of, it was the Joker with Nick Fuentes voiceover, and it's like Destiny says the N-word. I like that. You're gonna love me. Epic.
That was a good meme. Yeah.
But anyway, one of the top debate was like the Twitter files debate, and I never read the Twitter files, obviously. And I was like, okay, wait a second. What do I think about the Twitter files right now? My thing is like, well, basically the Biden administration use the intelligence agencies included with Twitter to censor people and all that stuff. And like right off the bat, like 15 minutes in the debate, it was pointed out the Trump administration made requests. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I would have thought this was in the Biden administration only. And so I was like, all right, I'm glad I'm not going to read the Twitter files. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take the person who I trust to give the best opposition argument to a perspective I already agree with. I'll just watch them duke it out, and then I'll observe the conversation. Just go, oh, he seems right on that. He seems wrong on that. And like when it got to the Hunter Biden laptop thing, you kind of gave a hypothetical steel man of the intelligence agencies, and I was like, yeah, I don't find that very compelling. So I'm more certain now that the FBI engaged in manipulative behavior to censor the Hunter Biden laptop story or whatnot. But like both of those things get derived from just watching you go at your best.
Okay.
That's Dr. Destiny. And then Mr. Borelli. Mr. Borelli is... It seems like Mr. Borelli undermines Dr. Destiny to a significant degree. Right? Like there's a lot of people who would listen to you. And who I would want to listen to you, who don't, because you say, I think, stuff that even you would acknowledge is like insane and sociopathic and less than moral.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Would I agree with the statement that there are some people that would listen to me if I didn't say
would
some
otherwise.
things? Yeah, some people would otherwise listen to me, but don't because of rhetoric I engage in. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, yeah.
That's a very different framing of how I framed it. I'm specifically pointing at the whole meme of the Mr. Borelli it's insane. Like some of the crazy shit. Like the firefighter. Whatever. It's like, okay. First off, what would I say? I've talked to Vosh. I talked to Andrew Wilson. I'm sure I'll have the misfortune of talking to Nick Fuentes at some point. I'm less interested in policing rhetoric as trying to genuinely understand. When you're on the Bridges podcast and you say to JJ McCullough or Mr. Beat, the problem is the temperature is turned up too much. Conservatives and progressives have a caricature of one another, and there's a very large middle ground of reasonable people who could, come together on solve important issues. That's almost verbatim what you say. And then it's like, okay, then you say the shit about the firefighter. I don't know which Destiny form I'm talking to often or watching. It's like, is your goal to bridge the gap? Do you believe that conservatives are caricatured and that's a problem? Or do you think that if they go to a Trump rally, they deserve what they get?
Deserve no sympathy.
Well, but you can.
No, I
surely you understand from my perception, how it's hard to square those two.
Yeah, I understand. So I think this is the challenge in doing what I do, where I'm trying to be relatively politically, ideologically independent in how I operate, meaning I'm not just trying to talk to only liberals or only progressives or only people that agree with me. I'm trying to talk to people that disagree with me. There's a special challenge there in weighing how combative do I want to be versus how not accepting, not charitable, there's a word I'm looking for. It's not empathetic. Do I want to be combative or do I want to be a bit more
charitable?
People are saying tolerant. Maybe agreeable. And there's a strength to both approaches, and there's a big negative to both approaches, and I have to constantly reinterpret and reweigh these things as like time passes to see if I am effecting some kind of outcome that I think is good. And there are big moments sometimes where I think I don't like the direction I've headed and I need a violent course correction because I haven't been calibrating correctly, leading up to something. That's, I would say. I would say that like an analogy for this might be, have you ever heard of the idea of like parents that let their teenage children drink in the basement? The idea that like, well, I don't really want my kid to drink, but if he's going to drink, like, fuck it, do it at my house. You're not up to no good, right?
I was friends with people whose parents were like that, much to my benefit.
Yeah. On its face, like we can understand that parent is having a Mr. Borelli versus Dr. Destiny moment where I don't want my children to drink or be up to no good, but like I'm going to condone underage drinking because I think that the benefit of doing it in this way outweighs not doing it. But we can imagine so many things along that spectrum that would be insane, right? That somebody might say like, oh yeah, well, if my kids are going to drink, I'd rather at least have them fucking drink here. And you're like, oh, okay, fine. And then you walk downstairs and you see that like the parents have like a fully staffed fucking bar with like a bartender.
Cocaine and hookers and shit.
Yeah, maybe they bring in some cocaine. Right? And you're like, okay, wait a second, hold on. This is way too much, right? And then you can imagine a world where somebody gets, intoxicated too much for the first time, they throw up, but it was like in the parents' basement, and they're like, hey, this is why you shouldn't do this shit. Like I told you guys, like you fucking like this is whatever, right? Where it's like more managed or whatever, right? We can see all of that on a spectrum. And yeah, the way that I engage with people is somewhere on that spectrum. Where in a perfect world, when I'm talking to somebody like a Jordan Peterson, what I really want to do is on every single statement you make, this is so fucking stupid. And we're going to break down exactly why it's stupid. And you need to justify every single premise here before we get to your conclusion, because all of them are wrong, right? But if I'm that combative, right? If I'm the parent that says, if I even see you take a sip of alcohol around me, you're out of here, okay? I don't care if you got to be a ward of the state or what, get the fuck out of my house, right? That hardcore approach, might work in certain environments, but for the vast majority of environments, it turns everybody off, right? You're like, okay, well, Jesus. Okay, well, that's destiny. He's the crazy, insane debate lord. But then on the other end of the spectrum, where I'm like, oh, okay, 20% excess deaths, all because of the vaccine. Okay, I mean, that seems pretty high, but okay, well, let's go to the next thing, right? Is like the parents that are like, okay, I guess if you want to do, you know, cocaine and maybe some downer, maybe you want to do some heroin. Yeah.
I get the analogy.
So it's trying to balance that out. And one of the things that I've noticed, and it happened, I saw it a lot after the Trump, I don't want to say assassination attempt because no one was charged with assassination, so it couldn't have been that. But in the firefighter shooter event, okay, when that happened, and then I started to see all of the conservatives become so indignant online about how inflammatory the rhetoric was, I retroactively perceive all of my participation in this space and like my conversation with these figures as me like playing a role in that, where I don't like the idea that that Peterson, that Shapiro, that Owens can say like, oh, well, I debated destiny, you know, blah. No, you didn't. We didn't have a debate. Okay, I showed up in a schoolgirl skirt and we played hopscotch for 2 hours, and I hate that I'm like I shouldn't have been a part of normalizing this so much, and now we're going to go a little bit more to the other end because this shouldn't be normalized and we're going to be somewhat unhinged here. Yeah, I'll let you go in. I can talk about.
Well, I mean, I get that analogy. There's a part. I mean, first off, I'm very empathetic to most people on everything in many ways.
Okay. What a saint.
Well, like I know. Saint must die before the end. Like when you said, Piers Morgan said, do you condemn the shooter? And you're like, in front of these people? No. And everyone's like, oh my God, that's wild. I'm like, Dave Rubin's on the screen. Hammer Time Dave Rubin. And then he's like rolling his, it's like, however degenerate and immoral you are, Dave Rubin is at least as degenerate and immoral if he's going to make jokes like that.
Yeah.
And so the whole like, well, not in front of these people, it's like, you know, and it's ironic because Piers Morgan, the meme around him is like, do you condemn Hamas? It's like, well, the truth is not only do I condemn Hamas, I think that the just thing would be every Hamas terrorist that killed civilians on October 7th should be thrown in a pit and lit on fire. But if an Israeli subtler is saying, do you condemn Hamas? I'm far less inclined to say, And it's
There's
like,
going to be some heavy qualifications there. Abso-fucking-lutely, yeah. If I'm in front of settlers and they're giving me that line, well, don't you condemn Hamas? And yeah, well, okay, sure, but we're going to talk about the settlements and everything too, because I need to hear something from you. Absolutely,
So this is my point is, for better or worse, I'm empathetic to that approach, and I guess I don't know. I'm not. It seems to me, I'll just show my cards and be as honest as possible.
Yeah.
Like, it seems so obvious that because you talk about, like, correction, I need to go too far. The analogy you gave is like, well, you can have parents that let their kids drink, but like, Jesus Christ, bringing the cocaine and the hookers in, that's insane. And it's like, of course, that's self-evidently insane. I would say it's self-evidently insane to mock the firefighter who died. And it's like, but then it's just me saying this and you saying that, and I guess I don't really know what the purpose of that is other than to point that out. Because it just seems to me like there has to be a part of you that knows that that's not optimal. Even for what you said about having to course correct and all that. Like, surely you can overcorrect. Like, would you agree that that was an overcorrection?
It's definitely stronger than anything that I would think would exist, like, ideally. That's
one way to say it.
That is one way to say it. Have you seen the video of like the old, I think this is in black and white. Maybe it was in the 70s or whatever. The woman that goes around pinching guys' asses on camera and then asks them like, how did that feel? Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, fuck. There's okay, well, take my word that I'm not stating this video with ill intent or misrepresenting it.
It doesn't sound like something someone could make up on the spot. I won't lie.
It was an old video in 1971. Sent Nikki Wood to go and pinch. So what she did was she walked around and she was pinching people. Fuck. Wait. Hold on. Give me one. Oh, wait. Never mind. So she walked around and she was pinching men's bottoms. Okay. Here, you can actually, you know what? Let me send this to you just real quick. You can watch like 10 seconds of this and immediately understand what's going on.
Okay. Are you sending me this on Discord or?
Yeah. Where else would I send it to? Where else do we communicate on?
That's fair. You were full screen.
Oh, okay. My bad. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah, you get it, right?
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So like we would say here, like pretty obviously, the woman is committing sexual assault, right? She is. Right. Walk around, you pinch somebody in the ass, right? Just...
This goes into the whole definitions thing. It's like we could label it that, but then that seems to.
Or we could say
undermine the
sexual
definition of
harassment
sexual.
if you want, or whatever. Some sort of like sexual harassment. It's sexual in
Sure.
nature. It's harassment. We don't have to call it subject. But like obviously, it's not good. We should never have people doing this ever, right? But she's proving a point. I think it's a good point. I think it's good to be aware of this. I think it's good to have a situation like this where you're seeing it from the other end, where somebody's doing something to you, and you're like, okay, I actually really don't like this, and I don't like seeing it, and this doesn't make me feel good. One thing that's hard for people, I think, to understand sometimes, hard to intellectualize or articulate, because I think everybody understands it intuitively, is negative and disgusting and immoral rhetoric is actually really powerful. It's a really strong motivator. When you dehumanize somebody and you do stuff like this, you're not doing this because you want to be the bad guy or evil. You do it because when you dehumanize people, you can attack them so much more. You can be so much more brutal. You get everybody on your side riled up. You see them as the enemy, the Amalek, right? You can go so much harder on somebody. And what I got super disgusted with on the and the shooting when the firefighter died was all of a sudden there were these huge calls to compassion from the conservative side who was, for all intents and purposes, like a conservative loony. This guy tweeted out some unhinged crazy shit. This guy was sitting at a fucking Trump rally, not sitting, standing, recording it. Like, this is one of Trump's ardent fans. That when we're supposed to have so much compassion for this guy, and liberals are always supposed to be tripping over themselves, being compassionate, being apologetic, which is a detriment to our side. It makes us look bad. Like, okay, yeah, we fucked up. Our rhetoric went too far. Like, it was too unhinged. We're sorry. We shouldn't have called you guys Nazis. Like, yeah, we're sorry. And the conservatives are getting to collect all this value and virtue. Like, yeah, you guys did fuck up. You should feel bad for this. Fuck you that this happened, right? And then immediately the next day, it's like, oh, they're commies, they're, the trans groomers, the conservatives get to benefit from all this dehumanizing rhetoric. It's like, no, hold on. Fuck you, okay? If we're going to make it a gunfight, then at some point I'm going to bring a gun. And I'm not going to keep showing up with a knife because this is bullshit. You guys can't collect this much value off of your dehumanization and expect us to never, ever, ever do it. It doesn't make sense. We're just destroying ourselves doing this the entire time. Like, we'll start to engage in similar behavior. So this is my thought process on when the Trump shooting happens, right? That whatever statements that I made about the firefighter dude that got shot up, I don't think they approached the level of disgustingness that of any of the people that argued against me about what they said about Paul Pelosi. Now, Paul didn't die, I guess, so maybe you can argue that, well, mine are worse because the dude died. But there were a lot of jokes made about that. So yeah, as soon as I saw that, I was like,
yeah, well, that's my point
dumb.
about why
Yeah.
I don't hold it against you that you didn't condemn it in front of them, because I think
Sure.
Dave Rubin is pathetic, and I'll leave it at that for that reason. Something about it's like, and the videos of Paul Pelosi lying on the ground and like when he was like snorting or whatever because he couldn't breathe because he got hit in the brain.
Okay.
It's like, oh, you're
Jesus.
joking about that?
Okay, I haven't even seen those.
You didn't
videos.
see that?
Nope. Holy shit. Okay, I probably would have been even more unhinged then.
Well, I believe that's. I have to. Well, if you haven't seen it now, I'm worried that those are not the accurate videos.
Well, no, I only read like articles and stuff about it. That's why I didn't go looking for any.
I believe the video, like when the 911 call, isn't it the 911 call? He shows up to the house, he like opens the door and he's kind of like talking kind of calmly because he's trying to keep the guy calm.
Yeah, because the guy's still there, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then Paul Pelosi's on the ground like snorting because he got hit in the head and it's like fucking up his ability to breathe. And Dave Rubin says hammer time. So it's like, spare me, Dave Rubin and crew. I understand that.
Yeah. Maybe I did I might have watched this video, but it was a long time ago, so I don't remember. So fuck.
That's fair. I guess. What is your? First off, the thing that I'm aware of in this conversation is it's really only the first time we've conversed. So I don't feel I've earned enough trust per se to go too deep into disputes right now, but just broadly, what are your goals with what you do on this channel in life? Like, because like I said, it seems to me the online political sphere is rapidly growing. I don't think anyone would dispute that. The biggest issue is that there is a big gap between online political influence and tangible political power. Now, you've attempted to bridge that gap with the canvassing efforts.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think like these progressive victory type PACs that try to bridge it, the Bridges podcast and all that is an attempt to be more mainstream and all that. So how do you see?
Yeah. Because
you're like the biggest figure in this space. So I'm curious.
There's multiple levels of there's multiple layers or levels of what's going on. So first level, the thing that I think I care the most about is people committing to some like good epistemic practice, because I think that everything, it's epistemology.
Anti-intellectualism is based.
I'm sorry, but now I'll be more serious.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Good epistemic practice. I want people to understand, like, how do you read a thing? How do you develop some level of information or knowledge? And then how do you deploy this knowledge in a conversation in a way that's meaningful, that engages with and intersects with, another person's arguments, and like come to some kind of like rational, logical conclusions. Not rational, logical, like, oh, I'm logical or rational, but as in like inductively, deductively, abductively, everything we're saying like comports with reality. It makes sense and it's structured well. That's my number one thing. That's my first big thing. Which is why a lot of my stream is in forming and constructing arguments and doing research and reading and evaluating, like, what's a good source, what's a bad source, like, what do we trust, what don't we trust, what kind of like pre-existing knowledge do we need to evaluate it, all this boring dumb shit, right? That's number one. Number two, kind of the layer that sits on top of that, that's probably, I guess in a way I'm kind of more known for it, I guess it depends on what arena you're in, is arguing the applied level of like the epistemic background is like, well, I've got certain political beliefs that I think are really important, and I want more people to believe those political beliefs. I think it's important that we, trade with the rest of the world, that we defend Ukraine against Russia, that we, do more to ensure equal rights and opportunities and access to things for people in the United States, right? Those are the applied things from my epistemic explorations, I guess, yeah. So those are like the two big kind of things that I try to do.
Okay, that's very interesting, because you said the first thing is you care about people having a solid epistemic. That's like your number one concern.
Yes,
is the proper epistemic approach. So you don't even necessarily. It's not necessarily in your long-term goals to translate, like, talking about politics to political operations per se.
I mean, like, if I want more people,
or is it for sure that's in your roadmap at some point?
It kind of is, yeah. I mean, for the canvassing and everything else, for the podcast we're doing and everything else, yeah, I'm trying to get more into the world for that. But it's, I don't know if that's where my main strengths lie. And personally, it's not even like my main, like, interests. Like,
okay,
if right now somebody presented me, like, we have another reality that you can step into where you immediately stop this and become the governor of California, I don't think I would do it. I think I'd rather stay here. Like, president of the United States, I would absolutely do that. You wouldn't want to be the governor of California? Well, governor would be pretty cool, though.
Of California? That shithole state?
My God.
No, thank you.
Okay. What about Florida?
That's a utopia. That's a freedom-loving utopia.
Okay.
Okay, so it's interesting. You said the thing you fundamentally care most about is getting people to have an epistemically solid framework.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, honestly, the reason I do not talk that much or care that much really about like play-by-play politics is not because I think it's insignificant. That's the opposite of the true. Arguably, it's more important than the underlying philosophy, because that's how it actually manifests, right? It's like the reason you care about epistemics is because it has practical implications.
Sure. I'll half agree to that, but not fully. But only because my only objection to that would be, I would say solid epistemics are more important than the applied level, because solid epistemic foundation can predict future applied levels. So we kind of agree or kind of disagree, right? Somebody might accidentally wind up with the right decision one time, but with a bad epistemic foundation, they'll end up with bad applied positions later on. So I would say being wrong on something is less important than having a good thought process, because you're more likely to be correct in the future.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. It's all in the framework, though, of you want people to do good things ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah.
So I would say that that's my fundamental concern. Actually, in the whole video that you watched prior, the Jordan Peterson Destiny overlap, where I concluded that you were probably autistic, which is in many ways
based
and a projection of myself, I'm sure. Otherwise, who would make a 17-minute video comparing Destiny and Jordan Peterson's underlying philosophy?
True.
Okay, so let's get into that, I guess. So that's the thing you're interested in most. So I'm thinking of something that I will say later, but I'm not going to say it yet.
Okay, write it down.
Remind me. It's been on my mind.
Oh
since the
shit.
beginning.
Okay.
Don't worry.
All right.
So then is your number one interest like epistemic philosophy, or like how do you? So you say it's important to have your epistemic grounding, your fundamental epistemic grounding properly. Okay, what does that look like to you?
Basically, when somebody pushes somebody on, well, how do you arrive at your beliefs? You're able to speak with more substance than to just say, like, I read a variety of sources and I try to have a lot of critical thinking and common sense. So ideally, it's somebody who can say, well, what?
If someone said that to me, I'd be like, fucking base.
Okay, yeah. But then I would say, well, that's meaningless, right? Like, two people can say, like, oh, I have, like, really strong common sense. That's why I think 14-year-olds and their parents should be able to discuss with their doctor if they should take trans drugs. And the other guy should be able to, and the other guy will say, well, I have common sense. I know that kids should never be taking trans drugs. Like, oh, wow. Well, seems like common sense isn't doing the same thing here for both people. I feel like common sense is a replacement for, it's like self-evident, like very applied belief where people are treating
intuition.
Kind of, yeah, sure, maybe, yeah.
What is the role of intuition in truth stuff? Because I'm trying to remember exactly some of your reactions to some of the stuff. Because on the one hand, and you yourself said there's this problem of people getting into the hyper autistic, like, well, what do you mean by this, and that? Which, by the way, I would say, and I know Andrew Wilson from a few years back now, your guys' debate was exactly that of just like, this is just pure semantic. Like, what is the definition of insurrection? Like, well, is a state an insurrection? And it's just like, you start drilling into the semantics of it that you lose the frame of like, what does it matter whether or not it is an insurrection? What's the significance of that? And it's breaking the frame from the semantic to why do we even care what the semantic truth is?
Yeah.
And eventually you get far enough where it's just intuition of like, I guess I believe that our culture puts way too much emphasis on truth equals logical consistency, truth equals propositional logic, and what there's a clip from Peterson where he says in that video, I think atheists and scientific materialists have the same problem, and this is what I think it's hitting on. It's like the presuppositionalists who I know you're a massive fan of.
Always.
The one-trick ponies of League of Politics, presuppositionalists. Every argument is...
What is your ultimate source of truth?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, unless... And then it boils down to...
How do you know that?
Well, yeah, and if you don't accept the Eastern Orthodox interpretation of God, you cannot make the claim that, pain is bad. It's like, okay, it's just whatever. But that's them from the hyper universalist moral objective side, saying logical consistency. Well, a life begins at the moment of conception because that's the only logical place we can define it. It's like, that's the continuum fallacy. It's like, at some point, red shades into orange, but where exactly it becomes orange it's a continuum, but I don't have to know exactly where red shades into orange to be able to point out that red is not orange. Right? I don't need to be able to tell you exactly when life begins or consciousness is conferred on a human being and it gets rights for me to say it definitely isn't the moment a sperm fertilizes an egg, because there's absolutely no... It's an unarticulated intuition.
Sure.
And then people will say, well, that's bullshit. And I would say almost everything we know and understand is from unarticulated intuitions. And it's built into the basis of our legal code. The reasonable person standard, when you drill down to it, is completely undefined. Well, what is a reasonable person?
What a reasonable person would think in it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, but what is a reasonable person? I believe, I think it's still the case. The definition of pornography it still defers to, I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. It's like that's an indication that your intuitions are able to know things that you cannot put words to. And people like Jordan Peterson, Ian McGilchrist, they hammer this home. And that's why I think a lot of the logical arguments, it's like, I don't believe that I am going to convince people so much through logical argumentation. I think people who are more amenable to logical argumentation, like you and your audience perhaps, but like the memes, the League of Politics champion spotlights, those are not logical tools. And yet I think they make my point, they illustrate my points, like Vosh talking about the postmodern point. What did he say? Many things for lakes and rivers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's mainly how people determine what's true or not. Is like, well, does it intuitively, if it can be mocked so easily, then it doesn't matter how logically, propositionally consistent it is. Okay. And that's a whole big spiel on, I guess, because I also, like I said, I care fundamentally about the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know what's true or whatnot? And I guess, I don't know, because you certainly, clearly you're funny enough often, and you're good at memery, and your Twitter feed is, S-tier memery, which was also captured in the Champion Spotlight.
Thank you.
Touch of irony. And that's exactly my point, is like, I think whether you know it explicitly or not, like that is often a better way to get people to ground their epistemics in some sense.
Well, it's a good way to convince people to believe in like certain applied positions, but not always a good way to bring people along epistemically. And so I could get in trouble later on if I try to make a point about a thing, and because people followed me in one sense intuitively, one way, now people are following me incorrectly in another way, or they can't follow me in another way. Let's say that I say that to figure out, if you square something, what you're really doing is you're taking the thing and then you're adding 2 to it. Okay, that's how you square something. So for the purpose of this argument, right, like 2 squared is 4 because 2 plus 2 is 4. Okay, 2 is the base number, you square it, so you add 2, so it's 4, right? Well, okay, cool, it works. But then if we get into some debate in the future where somebody wants to argue with me, and now we're talking about, 3 squared or 10 squared, well, now we're super off. It doesn't work anymore. We've fucked ourselves completely. So I might have given some bad explanation, or somebody would have followed me with some bad process, but in the applied area, we end up at the same spot, and we're like, oh, okay, everything's good. But then for future things, there's going to be huge divergences in the community. This is one of the reasons also why I pretty intentionally engage very with a lot of we can say edgy humor or stuff like that, is because I always want to make sure that my community expectations of my behavior and who I am are matching who I am as closely as possible. I don't want there to be some huge divergence in the future where someone's like, wait, holy shit, this guy's edgy, or oh my god, this guy thinks that racial humor is funny or whatever. It's like, no, yeah, I'm going to remind you to keep you on point pretty aggressively.
I do something similar. My all time is called reason is probably autistic.
Your mic disconnected for a second. Say that one more time.
Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah. It was when you were moving. Go ahead.
I said I do the same thing, and one of my best videos of all time is called "Why Everyone Who Disagrees with Me is Probably Autistic."
Okay.
So my goal is to forfeit immediately. Like, hey, if you think this is some clean cut, well, we're going to talk some philosophy here, and Jordan Peterson's thesis. It's like, no, that's the opposite. I think you're in that analogy you just made about what is it? Squaring equals +2. It's like,
yeah.
If someone is funny, if someone has a good eye for memery, they demonstrate it repeatedly, which would be the opposite of what you just said.
Sure. Well, what I'm saying is
someone can toss out a random joke or say something in a very odd way that people find funny. That happens often. People say something and they're like,
sure. So what I would say is that so I joke very irreverently about a lot of things, and sometimes people will come. They'll fall into my fandom during a particular arc, and it might be, say, an Israeli watching me rail on Palestinians and making a lot of jokes about, the Gaza Strip looks like a New York strip, steak, they're cooked, etc., stuff like that, and think it's really funny. And they're like, I like this guy. He's a funny dude. He memes well. Everything's cool here. But then as soon as I start making jokes about Israelis, now all of a sudden they lose their fucking mind, right? So they followed me because they saw one thing, they thought one joke, one particular type of thing was good, but now when I've moved to something different, using what I would consider to be the same type of thought process, but they're not using the same thought process, they just the applied level. Now when I move to something different, now they're mortally offended. This is why I focus on process more than just the applied stuff, because if I use only jokes or only humor or only rhetoric and I don't focus on any of the process, then I don't train any of my audience to follow me along to different things. I'm just collecting people that agree with my opinions on things. And ideally, I would want people that would agree with my process and that might disagree with some opinions, or would come to me and rely on, oh, when I go watch Destiny, today I'm going to get a take that is Stephen Bunnell's take on a thing, not just what progressives think, not just what conservatives think, but this guy who has a way of processing things and then gives me a particular thing. That's why I like to fixate on the process more. Understanding, obviously, there are some people that just agree with what I say because I either already share their opinions or they're, center left, broad left, and they're like, yeah, okay, fuck it, this guy's right, sometimes wrong, other times, but I like him or he's funny or whatever. But yeah.
All that makes sense. Do you? I can't say anti-intellectualism is base and then try to ask you these unironically. But are you interested in philosophy? Like when you sift through Wikipedia, what are the things that you find most compelling? Because it seems like if I'm just looking at proportion of time spent, it's a lot of, who said what on what day in what email in what, Twitter DM on January 6th, so on and so forth. What draws your what areas draw your interest the most? Because you said you're most interested in epistemic grounding, so I would assume it was surprising to me that when you were watching my video and you said, "Holy crap! Peterson's about to say something incredibly insightful. Where was this guy?" And I'm like, "That's the Jordan Peterson Sam Harris conversation. That's I assume that anyone who is into epistemology fundamentally would have." Well, maybe not watched it 4 times, but certainly would be aware of that fundamental dynamic. I regard the debate between Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, the Pangburn one, as the forefront of philosophical.
Sure. Is this where Harris has this very unfortunate assumption that he solved moral philosophy and the bridge of the is-ought gap by just vaguely alluding to some broad moral landscape? Was that the one where Peterson challenged him on that, or was this a different discussion?
Yeah, well, Sam Harris's moral philosophy is, I think he says he can solve the is-ought gap.
Yeah, by broadly alluding to some, moral landscape that.
Well, ironically, the reason that was so interesting is because it's not a debate per se, and he's wrong, he's right. It's they're both trying to circle around what's true.
No, they are, yeah. I think I watched this a long time ago, and I think I broadly agreed with Peterson on this because I broadly disagree with Harris's, moral philosophy here, and Peterson seemed to be very. The thing is that the difference is that when I listened to Peterson back then, I feel like I can feel this out very quickly. I think everybody can feel it out very quickly. When somebody's talking, you can tell one of the best human traits is curiosity. And when I listened to Peterson talk prior to the political brain rot, he just came off as a very intensely curious person. Every opinion that he had, every question that he asked, it seemed like there was a conflicted, troubled mind that was constantly fighting towards some closer to true statement than what the mind held before. Well, I don't know. Could I do this particular thing? Could you be a Nazi? Could you, is this something but the questions weren't just these rhetorical, political dunking questions. They seemed like genuinely good faith, insightful questions. And I feel like if I remember, it's been a long time since I watched it, but the conversation with Peterson and Harris, I think was pretty similar. He felt like that in the past, but now he's a lunatic, but yeah.
Yeah, now he's getting dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu,
Based.
who is objectively, of course, the best and has done no wrong and is certainly God's most chosen of his chosen people.
Absolutely.
Okay, let me ask you this question. How do we appeal to the Candace Owens crowd? How do you, not even appeal to, that's the wrong question. How do you solve the problem that is the negative side of populism?
I think that
there's definitely a positive side of populism, in my opinion.
I think that you have to, there's a lot of different ways. Different people have different roles in that. So for instance, if it's your so if it's your child or a parent or a sibling or a friend, right? Maybe the way that you do it is by very slowly over time introducing them to, thoughts, ideas, people, events where it's hey, well, let's watch this or look at this. Oh, look, the person that wrote the script for this movie was like a crazy feminist, but like it was pretty funny, right? Didn't we like this? Or hey, you know, like maybe like a slow over time type of pressure, you know, can kind of change people's thoughts or opinions or minds on things, right? From an activist perspective, there are different types of activists. People like who's the black guy? Fuck me, the black dude that talks to the KKK people.
Daryl Davis.
Yeah, Daryl Davis. So
He's the hero. That's
yeah,
pure enlightened centrist.
yeah. So he's a hardcore empathy approacher, right? This is a guy that goes, you know, I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to make you, you know, enjoy it, whatever. And then you got people that do kind of like the mockery angle, but they do it comedically, right? I would say like your Jon Stewart's, maybe your Stephen Colbert's. At least when you're like about a show, but like you're like your Jon Stewart's and stuff like that. I think everybody's got like a different role to play, and there's different ways to reach different people. So there's not like a one size fits all for the situation or the person doing it, right? Like if I'm debating a person, there 100%. Are, even for the same person, there are multiple approaches that I could take that would appeal to different ranges of that person's audience. If I'm arguing with, like let's say that I'm arguing with a conservative parent, and I'm arguing trans issues, right? Like I could come at it from we could come at it from like a personal empathy thing where it's like, hey, like if your child had a disease, like would you really want the government, you know, having conversations with you or outlawing what your doctor's allowed to prescribe? Like, wouldn't that be really scary? Like I might go at it from that angle, or it could be from like a philosophical government angle, right? Where you're like, yeah, you know, trans shit is really crazy. I agree. But a lot of lefties think gun shit is crazy. Like, isn't it better for the government to just fuck off from all these things and let us, you know, as people, you know, free people figuring it out from a, you know, liberalism perspective? Or you could go at it from like, you know, fuck the empathy, fuck the philosophy. You could go at it from a really brutal point of view. Like, oh, you think that the trans youth stuff isn't valid? Okay, well, how do you answer the fact that there are 3 huge meta-analyses that show these outcomes and blah, blah, blah? Have you even read the fucking research, right? Where it's like, ooh, shit. The person watching is like, ooh, my content creator looks kind of dumb right now. It makes me feel uncomfortable, right? All of these are like valid, and that all of them will have varying levels of success. But like it just, it's such a variable thing, right? We're at the end of the day, we're asking like, how do you persuade a person? And there's like so many answers depending on the situations for that. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. That all of that is 100% true, and that's on the rhetoric side of like, what is the way that you communicate things? And I suppose you could say that includes the content, because like you were saying, like, well, you know, let's approach it from do we want the government doing this? That's like sort of a different idea. But like fundamentally, I believe that the way that you defeat my number one concern, I don't know about number one. Well, one of my concerns.
Top concerns, okay.
Yeah, one of my top concerns. Although I think Terrence Howard proved that you can have multiple number ones or something like that. 1 times 1 is 2. So I've multiple number one concerns.
Base scientist guy, yeah.
Yes. And one of them is extremism on the far right and far left. It's a very brave take to say that both the far left and far right are insane.
Yeah.
And I'm a brave...
It's a meaningless statement, but yeah.
Person. Okay, why do you say it's meaningless?
Begs the question of what is far right and what is far left.
Sure. What?
Yeah.
Every word, like you said, begs the question. Eventually we get down to semantics of like, well, what do you mean by this, and that, or whatever. I think...
Sure, but what I'm saying is that I think that statement is tautologically true, such that when somebody says, well, what do you think is the problem? And you say, usually when far is a descriptor of a political ideology, there's a normativity baked into the word far of bad. So when somebody says the far left and the far right are problematic, what you're really saying is like the bad left and the bad right are problematic. What you're really saying is like the bad and the bad are problematic. And by problematic, you mean bad. So you're saying bad is bad. It's like, wow. Okay. Insightful.
I think that if you, I think you're abstracting it too far away from the practicality of it.
I don't think so. I think it's perfect.
Well, I can give you the far. Well,
like if somebody were to answer, what do you think of the problems? And you would say, well, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
If somebody were to say, what are the problems? And instead of saying far left and far right, if somebody says, I think that there is a huge issue with the far left and the far right, where the far left are people that don't have enough respect for things enshrined in the Bill of Rights, and they want the government to be too much encroaching on our rights. And there's a problem with the far right, and that they are too interested in totalitarian worship of Donald Trump and his, grasping for too much power in the executive. That's the big problem. oh, now you've like defined concrete things, and now I know what you're saying, and you've identified things that now that maybe don't have normative value initially. Now you're giving them some. You're telling me what's bad on both ends instead of just saying the far left and the far right, which are open to interpretation. Yeah.
Sure.
Wait, you know what? Let me just say this real quick. I've just invented this in my mind. That the initial thing when somebody's like the far left and the far right, I consider those to be fortune cookie statements where you're saying like, if you persevere, good things will come to you. It's like, okay, yeah. But like every single person would probably agree with this. The far left and the far right, except for the craziest people.
That's actually, so, this is why I disagree with the framing of what you just said.
Okay.
First off, I agree just saying far left bad, far right bad it doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah.
Like you said, you have to say how they're bad and on what issue.
Sure.
I guess the framework I approach is on literally every issue, there is a far left position that's bad and a far right position that's bad. And they're different, but they're both bad. And that's why we call one bad left and one bad right, because they are different and they're both bad.
Sure, but I already don't like the staging of this because it's assuming that in every single argument we can identify a far left and a far right, and that the correct answer is going to be in some pretty negotiated middle ground between the two.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to be proven wrong in real time on Destiny TV.
Mm-hmm.
I am 99.9% sure, epistemically, on the roots of everything I believe, that you can do that 100% of the time on every issue. You can always identify a position that's too far left and too far right, and the middle ground is a synthesis of the concerns of both. That's the meme behind enlightened centrism, which is a meme I've recently rebranded away from. I won't say what I rebranded away from, but
sure. Okay. I kind of agree with you. Okay, follow me on this, okay? Because this is gonna get messy. I'm gonna draw out an example for you, okay?
If I had a nickel.
We're gonna use abortion as the example here. All the numbers and positions I give you are totally fake. I'm not saying that there's polling data to this, okay? All right.
I too spread misinformation.
Yes, okay.
Just kidding. Go ahead.
Let's say that I'm going to go left to right, and I'm making these numbers up, okay? Let's say all the way on the left, let's say that 1% of the population believes in unlimited abortion, okay? The baby's head is coming out, and the doctor's there with a hammer, okay? Ready to Paul Pelosi the baby right as it comes out. He's cave that right as it comes out, okay? Baby's on the ground making the noises and everything, okay? Yeah. So we've got the 1% on the very, very, very far left, okay? Then let's say we have 99% of left people are abortion legal for first trimester, okay? Okay.
That's where I'm at, by the way.
Okay. And then let's say you've got, let's say that on the right of this, you've got 1% of conservatives are saying, what would be a 1%? That let's say 1% are saying, Plan B is okay, and then rape and incest exceptions are okay. And then let's say you've got 99% saying, never abort ever, okay?
Yeah, it's first degree. If a 19-year-old girl takes a Plan B pill, that's first degree murder, which is premeditated murder.
Sure.
And the person that did it should be locked up longer than someone who committed second degree murder.
Exactly.
Which is insane.
Right.
But let's say, okay, sure.
Okay. So I typed this out in Discord. Okay. So
should I have the stream pulled up to see it?
You don't. Well, you should read it. You don't have your video. It's not that much. But so when we look at the spectrum of beliefs right here, okay, we've got 1% of the left is unlimited abortion. 99% is abortion legal for first trimester. And then we look at the right, and we've got 1% of people on the right are like, Plan B is okay. We probably have like a rape and incest exception. And then 99% are really over there saying, no abortions ever, first degree murder, right? When a person walks into this world and he says, well, I think that the far left and the far right are both wrong on this, and I think that we need a middle ground between the two. On a very strictly, maybe deductive sense, our middle ground is going to be somewhere in the absolute middle of this graph, but the intuitive feeling from most people is the middle ground between these are going to be really, really far to the right because of how many people are on and where they're on both sides of the spectrum. Does that make sense the way that I say this?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm following this logic. I have my issues, but
Go for it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that like when people say that like the far left and the far right are both wrong, the implication there, even if people don't understand it, the implication is that the opinions are distributed in some sort of distribution that is like even on both sides between all the crazy opinions. And sometimes there are positions that like the far left and the far right might have an idea about slavery, but like it's not like a negotiated centrist position between the two. The correct answer is probably going to be, it's going to skew much harder, probably on the anti-slavery side, I would say. Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so a couple things.
Go
Number
for it.
one, I would say the numbers that you put here, logically, if we're going to put those numbers there, then I agree with you. I would say this is not reflective of anything approximating reality. This hypothetical has as much utility as asking about, well, if we could go back in time and kill Hitler. It's like...
Well, hold on. To be clear, wait. The utility of the hypothetical is just to show that if the distribution isn't even on both sides, then saying that there's a negotiated middle ground that will always be true, it's not very satisfying, I think. Because people feel like that just can't be the case, that there's a middle ground between the two. Like, what is the reasonable middle ground here?
Okay, well... there's a couple paths
Go for it, yeah.
to go down. So first off, I guess I'll hone on this for just a second. The abortion thing, the numbers that you gave are exactly my point, because the reality is almost everyone agrees we should not abort babies up until like the moment they come up, the moment they're born, right? The Ralph Northam, what is the Alex Jones thing? We'll keep the baby comfortable and all that. Like, that's insane. That's completely...
Sure.
Like, I'm happy to call that satanic. And I think for good reason. I think it's equally insane to say the moment is, like, we should ban contraception, or we should... If a 19-year-old girl takes a Plan B pill, that's first-degree murder, because it was premeditated. Almost everyone agrees that both of those are too extreme on the issue of abortion, right?
Yeah, but there might be a lot more people that are closer to one thing than the other. And I think I can give you evidence of this kind of. The evidence would be that when people debate this topic, what they're doing is they're actually, even if they can't articulate it or intellectualize it intuitively, they're trying to do what I'm illustrating and articulating here. For instance, when a conservative argues, what does a conservative always say when they're arguing against abortion? What do they always talk about? They always talk about...
It's a life. It's a baby.
Well, kind of that.
Killing babies.
But more specifically, they always mention third trimester abortions. Every time. You always hear third trimester. But as you said, accurately, how many people actually support third trimester? Like, nobody. That's an incredibly rare position.
Right.
But what they're trying to do is they're trying to show they're trying to show a distribution to push people in a certain direction, to show that, like, no, most of the people on this are not actually correct at all, by making the other side be as heavily distributed to the most extremist opinions on the other side as possible.
Right. So it is entirely then the responsibility of the left to say, hey, fuck these, we agree these people are satanic nut jobs, and no one of any goodwill or common sense should support abortion up until the moment it's born. That's insane. And if people on the left were more vocal about that and preemptively neutralizing the conservative criticism, then suddenly the conservatives' best talking point is now gone. You've robbed the radical of their best talking point.
True, but now look at what happens then, and this is where you, play your dastardly role, all right? The far left and the far right, are bad, and we need to have some intellectual negotiated position in the middle. Well, because the far left wants to be, good, and we need to do what we need to do to disavow our crazies, well, now we've disavowed those people. Well, now who's there? Here's your new spectrum. Well, now what's the center? Because the far right is never disavowing their crazies, ever. So now you're like, well, fuck. Well, now the negotiated middle position.
Okay, right there, hold on.
Yeah,
right
go.
There.
Yep, go.
You said the far right the right's never going to disabuse their crazies.
Yes.
I disagree with that. I think that there's examples. Well, first off, it depends on who we're talking about. But you're right. It is the obligation of... Okay, well, hold on. Two things. First off, it is the obligation of, when I say the left, I mean both... The biggest barrier to the interests of the good left and the good right is their own crazies mucking up their own, platform or positions or whatever, right? I believe there's a lot of moral criticism and necessary criticism of Israel that should be made. There is nothing that gets in the way of making that case than a bunch of autistic Zoomer Nazis who hide in their basement and can't get a girlfriend and then blame it on, the real thing is because it's the Jews. And they're like sitting in their Cheeto dust. It's like those people become, oh, look, hey, anyone who criticizes Israel, you don't want to end up like these people. And so now the valid criticisms that could otherwise have been levied against Israel have now been diminished because of these autistic Zoomer Nazis.
I understand what you're saying.
Same thing with the pro-Hamas left.
I understand what you're saying, but if you disavow your figures and the other side won't disavow theirs,
that's an advantage to you because my point is the far right. The point I just made.
Mm-hmm. It's not an advantage to you. You're in a losing position. This is hence the unhinged rhetoric. This is the whole firefighter thing, right? Is that because then what happens is I have to discount a bunch of people that must be far left because even the center left is disavowing them. But then when I turn to the right, there's a whole range of reasonable opinion, even if I would consider some of these opinions obviously needing to be disavowed. Okay. If you want, we could run through a ton of examples, but I think that this is like very evident.
Hold on, let's stick with the abortion one.
Yeah, sure.
I think her name is Sister Cindy. She's like the TikTok. There are these like fundamentalist Christians that go to campus and say like, if you're a lesbian, you're going to hell. If you're gay, you're going to hell. This is murder. It's like those people do more to undermine the pro-life argument than anyone else because everyone's like, look, I don't really care that much about whatever the topic is, abortion or otherwise, but like these people are clearly weird. Human beings, most of their epistemics are intuitive, and if someone is weird, this is why the J.D. Vance weird thing is, I guess we'll see how effective it is, but in principle it could be effective, is because if you associate the like character flaws and psychological flaws with people who have a certain position, that's a great way to make sure that people don't want to get near that position. How many people don't want to criticize Israel precisely because it is true that a lot of the people who criticize Israel are a bunch of fucking freaks? It's like if those freaks didn't exist, then you'd be able to make the case that you want to make much easier. And your point about now it's 99% abortion is legal for first trimester, but now like there's a lot of people saying we should lock up or we should ban contraception. That's like the most extreme one. Ban condoms. Condoms should be illegal. If I were on the left, I'd be like, hey, let's platform as many Republicans saying we should ban condoms as possible because people can see that and go, that's insane. Now, if you believe that the average person is able to hear that and go, oh, maybe we should ban condoms or something like that, well, that's fine. Then we have just different presumptions about the world because I have a lot more faith in detect bullshit.
I'm appealing
coming from a charismatic person.
Yeah, I'm appealing so much to perception and anecdote here. Maybe we have different perceptions here. I don't know if either of us could prove this on the spot, but like when I think of abortion debates and a policy debate between two lawmakers or two big figures, here's what I'm thinking. This is always going to happen in the debate. Somebody on the right is invariably going to say, you need to disavow third trimester abortions. Why would anybody do this? You need to. I saw Pete Buttigieg had to wrestle with this. Everybody always brings up third trimester, right? And it's like, okay, fine. I do it. I disavow. That's horrible. I agree. It's bad. Okay. All right. And then when you say, do you disavow people that want to fucking ban contraception for teenagers? Do you want to disavow people that want to ban Plan B? Well, teaching contraception in school is actually really bad, and Plan B, sometimes it can affect the hormones, and it's like, there's never, ever an equivalent disavowal, and it never hurts them. And then when I go into a debate, go ahead. Yep, go.
That last part, we utterly disagree, because I would say the perfect example is Donald Trump not condemning the far right, whatever that was, the Proud Boy. The white supremacist thing where he said, who do you want me to condemn, Proud Boys? Stand back. It's like, arguably, that hurt him very significantly versus had he said, white supremacists, they're losers. Anyone who goes and dresses up in those things are he could have easily spun it and got a laugh, but precisely because he didn't condemn his extremists, I think that worked to undermine him. Now, we
can say that, but that was a close election, and he was the second most votes any candidate's ever gotten in all of presidential history. So I mean,
but perhaps he would have. And fair enough, we don't know. This is my point, and I'm not trying to.
Sure.
Can you still hear me?
Yep.
I'm not trying to.
I hold on real quick. I understand what you're saying, that maybe that did hurt him, but oh my God, look at how far we have to go, right? All throughout the election, Biden and Harris are constantly saying the rioting, this is not okay. We shouldn't be burning down cities. The rioting's not okay. Could you imagine if it was like pulling teeth to get one of these guys to like disavow like a violent action from the left? It feels like the left.
Right after Trump said what we did, I'm not the Proud Boy thing.
Uh-huh.
Biden said Antifa's not an idea, not an organization. It's like what? Also stupid as fuck on Biden. Like, nobody likes Antifa.
Hold on, because the difference is that the Proud Boys was a specific group of people that were involved in particular protests, and criticizing Antifa is like criticizing like BLM
Racism
or
in general,
conservatives or what is it?
I would say that's an optical win. It doesn't matter if it's a specific group.
Well, no, in this case it did, because they were referring to a specific event that a specific group was at. And to just say like, oh, well, do you condemn Antifa? Like, all throughout their campaigning, Biden and Harris had condemned the riots. They condemned violence. Donald Trump never, ever meaningfully condemned any of the violence.
Surely, if we're just stepping out of the frame we're in right now, momentarily, surely you would agree Antifa are fundamentally the same degenerate basement-dwelling freaks that the far right are.
Absolutely not. No, of course not. Like,
I
I think
it's
you
the same like personality types and all that. Like, it's the same fundamentally.
people that are like
weirdos.
activists or go and protest, like in general, are always going to be kind of weird. But like,
violent.
What? No, absolutely not.
violent.
No, absolutely not. It's like saying BLM is like the protests for BLM are violent. That's not true. The vast majority of them are. Same thing with Antifa. There are crazy fucking people that protest as Antifa or riot as Antifa. There are crazy fucking people that do as BLM, but it's not like a particular organ. It's just like it's a huge umbrella tent term.
Okay, I guess we just have fundamental because like. I would say you could say the exact same thing about the right. It's like how many.
But you can't say the same thing about the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys was an explicit, specific organization of far right, alt right, racial extremists. It's a very specific. It's a group.
I don't think that's accurate. I believe Enrique Tarrio was a federal agent, and he's Hispanic as fuck. So
sure, and well, I mean, Nick Fuentes is also.
Yeah, but Nick Fuentes, if you didn't know he was Hispanic, you wouldn't be able to tell. Enrique Tarrio, you can tell.
Sure, no, that is true. Okay, maybe they backed off a little bit about the racial supremacy, but they were a far right, alt right, like far right, like the Tiki Torch March in Charlottesville wasn't just like a happenstance, random thing that happened. Like,
okay, but the Tiki Torch people in Charlottesville are the extreme, are like the BLM riots that did go violent. It's like how many people were at the Charlottesville riot that went violent? Several thousand?
It's not about who went violent. It's about like if there was an organization.
How many people held tiki churches?
I don't know how many, but I know that if there was an organization that staged a demonstration, and that organization was staging a demonstration with things saying like, go. I don't know, like go Hamas or whatever. I would say that like for instance, right now, here's what I would say, right? I would not say that college protesters, leftist protesters in the United States are evil, horrible people. But if you could show me an organization that organized a march, they were saying like they were pro-Houthis, and I would say whatever org that is, these are evil people. I don't care if only 10% of you are doing it. That's your organization. You're doing this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But Antifa and BLM are like broad. They're not like, it's not like a particular thing, right?
Okay. I guess because I think we're getting...
Sure.
We're just comparing perceptions right now, and I'm not. That's
okay.
Not.
Well, I will say in a very roundabout way.
way to come that
sure, and we can eject off of this, which is fine. But I will say that in a way, what you're saying right here, I would argue, this is proving my point that conservatives have optically finagled, or not optically, rhetorically finagled these conversations to where we're even having to say, is Antifa the left equivalent of Black Lives Matter? This makes me want to say, oh, well, fuck. You know what we really needed? We needed more violent Black Panthers, because that would have been a specific organization we could. And now Antifa would just be like broad left-wing protesters. Like on the right, you've got counter protesters. I don't think they ever really have a fucking name. Blue Lives Matter, maybe, or whatever. But since we don't have that particular organization because we've been forced to disavow all the crazy far left extremist shit, well, now we're talking about Antifa and BLM. It's like, well, fuck, if I disavow that, Jesus, what, like those are the same as the Proud Boys, like a specific, like, organization with an actual leadership structure and coherent like marches that puts out announced like Jesus. They're not even the same thing. But I think that's a result of where the conversation has moved. Go ahead.
Okay, and fair, and yeah, and maybe we should eject because like what you just said, it's like the violent parts of the BLM riots were objectively worse than any violent right-wing riots in the last 5-10 years, as far as I remember. In terms of damage done.
Objective is a hard word here because we can
in
value
damage done. In terms of damage done, like people killed, damage done. Now, January 6th, damage to democracy. Okay, fine.
Exactly what I'm saying. Subjective, what we value.
Yeah, but fair enough. And this is earlier. You made the point of people have different, like the Daryl Davis guy has a certain temperament.
Yeah.
So it would be wrong for him to engage and make the meme edgy jokes that you do.
Well, I wouldn't say it's wrong, but like he has his strategy and it's effective and it works for him.
Well, it would be wrong from a practical perspective. Like,
Sure.
that's not his style.
Sure. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it doesn't comport with his style.
It's a League of Legends stuff. It's like you don't build AD Janna, right? It's
Yeah,
like
maybe
could,
you don't,
but
loser.
You should.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe that is a bad example. I haven't played in a while. But
I've seen your Nunu and your ObGG, so careful.
Actually, the only champion I've ever gotten a pentakill with in a ranked team was Nunu.
Yeah.
Ever. That's because I play Warwick top and Volibear top, and I don't get past triple kills on that. But I had a 60% win rate and a 4.0 KDA on Volibear top. This was like season 6 with like 200 games. High platinum. This is before they added Emerald.
Okay.
Which case, listen, I don't want to get canceled for what I would say about Riot Games and League of Legends.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah, this is the point about different temperaments doing different things. It's like our temperaments make us good. Our kits make us more adaptable to certain strategies.
Sure.
I would say our personalities also determine what our perceptions are.
To some extent, yeah.
Like, again, my intuition, and talking to you, I'm obviously more right-wing than you. And then when I talk to Andrew Wilson, I'm more left-wing than him. Whatever. It's like, certainly, compared to you, my perceptions are just much more right-wing of the damage done to communities and lives from the Black Lives Matter riots is astronomically more significant so far than the January 6th damage. Now, you could say in 50 years from now, we look back in history and January 6th, because we didn't properly arrest everyone and King Trump took over and killed everyone. It's like, okay, fine.
Sure.
And that's certainly, I'm not ruling that out. My intuition says that's wrong. And the Black Lives Matter riots did much more material damage to the most vulnerable people in society.
Sure.
And it's just a matter of perceptual difference there.
Well, I don't disagree with you there.
Go ahead.
I don't disagree with that. Materially, it would be almost impossible to argue with you. I'm just saying that the Proud Boys is an organization with hierarchy and structure, okay, that we can point to and look at leadership, messaging, organized plans or whatever. Yeah. And Antifa and BLM are just like large movements. Like if
that's not an important. If anything, that distinction makes it like less relevant to
the problem is that
worse that it's not a specific organization.
The problem is that when one is brought up in the context of the other, there is an equivalency created in the mind of the listener, and I think intentionally done in the mind of the speaker, in order to make these two things seem like one another. So if, for instance, we could say, and I would say, I think that being a Proud Boy is not good. Based on my understanding of the movement, what they stand for, their messaging, it's just never good.
I was going to say, to be clear, I think you might want to go with a different organization than Proud Boy, because I believe Proud Boy is like the Gavin McInnes like men's club.
Let me put it this way, okay? Gavin McInnes is, not only is he fucking insane, so that's already a red flag. He left because the movement, I think, got too crazy. Even 2018, I think he left.
Sure.
He
was Enrique Tarrio was the leader, and Enrique Tarrio, whatever he is, he's not a white supremacist.
He might not be a white supremacist, sure, but he's crazy and he did crazy shit. And their message. I'm just saying that, like, if somebody were to say uniformly, right? If you're in the Proud Boys, it's probably not good, okay? But if you've been to like a BLM protest or you've been to like an Antifa protest, there's a whole spectrum of people there. Some might be good, some might be bad. Some are surely bad.
Not Antifa. I would say Antifa, you're categorically in the same. Proud Boys and Antifa, in my mind. If you go to any meeting called Proud Boys or Antifa, you are probably of the same personality type.
Okay. Do you acknowledge at least that structurally they're far separate? They're different?
Of course.
Okay. The issue that I have is the issue that I have is the equivalency drawn between the two. It would be like, let's say somebody's like, I need you.
Moral equivalency, not structural.
No. There's other types of equivalencies drawn as well. Let's say that I'm having a conversation with somebody and I'm like, I want you to disavow. I need you to tell me you do criticize like Hitler's actions or something, right? Like you do think that like the death camps were bad or whatever, right? And somebody's like, I'll agree to that if you can admit that Harris and Biden continued the border camps for children that you said they were going to end. I'm never ever agreeing with that. Even if I agree with the proposition that they should have ended this particular policy, I'm not gonna make my agreement on that contingent on your agreement that Hitler's death camps were bad, because it's not just the moral equivalency. There's another type of ontological equalization happening there that I think the viewer is thinking. And I feel like, well, like I would say, I understand you disagree, but I would say even for you that like, yeah, Antifa and the Proud Boys, they're both like organizations that have bad people. It's like, there are definitely bad Antifa protesters. I don't like people generally if you call yourself Antifa, but it is fundamentally a different thing. Even if most of them are bad, it's fundamentally a different thing. Yeah, but
okay,
that's
fair
it. Yeah,
enough.
but okay.
Let's eject momentarily.
Okay.
Because the broader point is
Mhm.
far left position, far right position, answer is somewhere in the middle. Your point about percentage of opinions at any given time, I think that's fair. Like you know, like for example, what's a good one? I don't know, like you know, universities are clearly very far left wing, broadly speaking.
I'll half agree with you.
I'll take a half agreement. That's
Okay.
fine. And so certainly like, well, and it is changing so much. A lot of companies are like killing their DEI departments and all that.
The only reason why I said I would half agree is because like when we think of protests and like activists and shit, it's really a really small percentage of the student body. Like even up at like fucking Yale and shit. Like if you talk to students, most of them will say like, yeah, we don't do the protesting shit. We just go to class. But the people that do protest are very far left. Yeah.
What about the faculty broadly? Like if you survey professors' opinions, they're almost all not even far left per se, but they're definitely left.
They're more left. Yeah, I would say the administrators are a huge problem for sure. Faculty can have issues. Sure. Administrators have a huge problem, I think. But yeah, that's why I say I half agree. But I probably agree for all intents and purposes of what you're going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, but at any given time, you know, you can imagine a world where the Christian nationalists take over and suddenly that's changing. Like I do worry about the Christian nationalist ascent, and then like banning evolution in schools. Like that's a real thing that could happen. That's concerning. Now, this is how I see it. Your role in the Great Meme Wars is to go. What's a good analogy? Malphite, maybe. Although you're too skinny. You dive in and you go straight in and you go like you go to Fresh and Fit.
Yeah.
You talk to Nick
I'm
Fuentes.
Tristana.
People, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's good. Glass cannon still goes in.
Absolutely.
That's a very good analogy. Did you play a lot of Tristana? Was that like one of your main?
Hell yeah! What? Yeah, W is for forward. You always jump forward. If I'm ever playing a league game as Tristana, you see me W to escape. Oof, big mistake.
That's funny. The degree to which I wonder how much of that is a function of personality, like mapping. Like I just like this character.
Sure. Well, you know, anyway. if you want to know how much is a function of personality, my main was Draven. So there you go.
That's fair. But my point is, your job in the meme wars is to go straight fucking in. W's for forward. You don't care. You know, you'll talk to Fresh and Fit. You'll talk to Nick Fuentes. You'll talk to.
Sure, it's one of the things I have a strength at doing so. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say specifically, like Jordan Peterson. I think he is acting cowardly when he says he will utterly refuse to have a conversation with someone like Nick Fuentes or something like that.
Okay.
Now, you could say from a practical perspective, Jordan Peterson would just get steamrolled because he doesn't understand memes and he gets angry too easily, and that would get exploited. And that's probably true. Peterson has, due to his commitment to the Daily Wire and all the lies that you're required to internalize, I would believe, as a condition for working there, he has fallen from grace.
Are you a Nazi?
Are you asking me unironically?
I just connected like 4 things in my head. You're talking a lot about the Daily Wire and how that was the downfall of him and not Bill 16. You just mentioned the lies that were internalized there, which is a huge Candace Owens talking point about having to defend Israel because Ben Shapiro is Jewish. And then you've made analogies in the past, a lot referring to defending or attacking the nation of Israel. Oh, shit.
Did you hear me talk about autistic Zoomer Nazis earlier? And how they utterly...
True, but Fuentes calls himself an autistic Zoomer Nazi. And you didn't say no when I just asked you now. Oh, shit. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. My bad. Go ahead. Forgot I said that. I was just poisoning the well a little.
I was going to say, and I get that that's funny, but you have a large audience, and so
you're good.
That's
Don't worry about it. My bad. Just kidding.
Nobody hates Nazis more than I do. Okay, and I think Nazis are as bad as communists. How about that?
Wow.
What was I saying before you?
before I mind fucked you. You said that Peterson was a coward for not talking to Fuentes, but you understand why he has to do it because he has to carry the Daily Wire talking points.
Yeah, and by the way, what I mean by that is I regard Netanyahu as a fucking barbarian, and they got dinner together, and that whole organization is clearly of the opinion that, well, we shouldn't criticize Netanyahu in the middle of the war, and it's like, okay, not even the most. Benny Morris doesn't defend Netanyahu. Benny Morris calls Netanyahu a complete idiot. Like, there's almost no one of any repute who seems to be defending Netanyahu.
Yeah,
and for good reason, I think. So that's why I don't like Peterson at the Daily Wire.
Okay.
But to the point about different personality types engaging in different, what do you call it? Like strategies. Yeah, whatever. Maybe Jordan Peterson shouldn't be talking to Nick Fuentes, but like you don't care about edginess. You can go in, you can talk to anyone. That's your kit. That works.
A little bit. I do think it's a little unfortunate. I feel like I'm equipped. I can excel in some things that I think are highly contradictory generally for traits that you see in people. Like, I think that I can, like at my best, have incredibly compassionate and empathetic conversations with people, which I think I've demonstrated by talking to a lot of people.
I 100% agree.
Yeah, but I also excel a lot in being an absolute degenerate piece of shit, screaming down somebody's throat and trying to demonstrate that they're a dumb fuck, right? Which are
Mr. Borelli mode.
Yeah,
yes,
and these things
that's
are
why it's a
very
toggle. And they both have their applications.
Sure.
I mean that unironically.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're so successful, is because you do operate in both. Now, I would say
there's levels of success, and where some people would say that, well, Dr. Borelli has just destroyed Dr. Benelli because now, or Dr. Morelli, right? Because now people won't talk to you because you've been too whatever. Fuck you. Yeah. You're Frankenstein, you're whatever, your shit is fucked, you're other people. But then on the flip side, because people only see what they want to see, me being really empathetic and compassionate to people has also fucked me in a lot of cases as well. There's a lot of communities that hate me just because of who I talk to. Yeah. So it's always a balancing act. But I have to balance it compared to my personal stuff, because if I rely on any community, I would just be one or the other. But
yeah, and I would say in some sense, like your job everyone serves enlightened centrism. That's how I see it. Enlightened centrism is the great meme, the union of order and chaos. This is the basis of Petersonian maps of meaning philosophy, which I have internalized, and I've searched the internet far and wide for anyone even approximating a convincing critic of Peterson's underlying philosophy. Never heard of it.
Okay.
Happy to talk to anyone who disagrees with it to the point where they think they can criticize it.
Wow.
In a compelling way.
Okay.
That's my claim. At the basis of that is union of order and chaos. The truth lies in the balance of these two fundamental aspects of reality, which we can abstract out to left and right. So everyone serves enlightened centrism. Your job is to stop people who would otherwise go too far left from going too far left, right? I presume that you are not in favor of 13-year-olds being able to get double mastectomies.
The surgery stuff, probably not.
For the purpose of gender.
Yeah, obviously.
Not like cancer or some shit.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, you almost got me on that one.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
a Nazi shows good faith here.
Yeah. I generally probably not, but like my answer for this is always just going to follow like medical research.
Exceptions. Okay.
Well, no, not exceptions. It would just follow like outcome related research. I don't have like a strong moral foundation here where I'm like 13-year-olds can never make this decision. It would be like if research came out and there's so many people doing this and there was a whatever attrition rate and blah blah blah. Like, okay, fine, fuck it. If it works, then go for it. Yeah, I would just follow it on that. Yeah. So my understanding right now is like SRS, sex reassignment surgery, and top surgery isn't go ahead.
Okay. I won't, even though I feel licensed and you just asked if I was a Nazi, I won't go down if medical research suggested that 13-year-olds are capable of giving sexual consent, should that also be considered too? Don't even answer. Don't play.
Yes, absolutely. I know a lot of hot 13-year-olds, so.
Enlightened centrism, everyone serves it. You, like I said, employ your edginess as demonstrated.
Okay. If I was being edgy, I would have said 7-year-old. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. Your role, what?
My role in the great meme wars is to...
Just to be really clear, hold on, to clarify on that, okay?
Yeah.
I don't actually know any hot 7-year-olds. Okay, sorry. Go ahead. I'm done. Go ahead.
My role in the great meme wars is to tell conservatives, hey, this Well, you don't have blue hair anymore, but when you did have blue hair, this blue-haired SJW, you know, he calls conservatives artards, fascist, all this different stuff. This guy that, you know, you guys hate. He stops a lot of people on the left from advocating for 13-year-olds getting their breasts surgically removed, or insert whatever extreme left-wing position you don't agree with, socialism or something. And my job is to tell the conservatives, hey, listen, if the price that you have to pay for a large figure on the left, preventing people from going too far left, advocating for, you know, like the Hassan Piker world, if the price you have to pay for that is this, you know, streamer guy calls you artards every now and then, my job is to convince them that that's worth it, because I do think it's worth it. I do think you being edgy and saying things that I would regard as incorrect or wrong or whatever, immoral, degenerate, whatever. It's like, insert whatever word. You still have, like, arguably that is what enables you to do the things that I think are good. And I think that everyone has, I think that's a temperamental thing. I think for anyone who's a large figure, not anyone, because you can get true, genuine grifters, but like Candace Owens. Well, geez, let's see. How do I say this optically correct? I think Candace Owens absolutely is in possession of a lot of truth, unfortunately. She says things that are true. I'm doing the Candace Owens Champion Spotlight, so I'm watching a lot of her podcasts, and it's like, she's not lying when she cites like specific historical events. I think Solomon Morell, all these different people or whatever. So she's fulfilling a role. Now, I would say it's unfortunate because she's incompetent in many ways, just like I am and you are in our own ways. I think she recently she said Stalin was Jewish or something, and even Nick Fuentes was like...
Based, okay.
Yeah, he was not Jewish. So she's clearly making mistakes. But, like, I think it is good, for example, and I would say Tucker Carlson falls in the same role, that there is people within the Christian framework, the Christian nationalist framework, who are pushing back against, like, Christian evangelical Zionism. The politicians who say, literally, the basis for their foreign policy is, well, Israel is, you know, there's a verse in the Bible that says God will bless those who bless Israel, and so that's what I'm going to do. There's a clip of a congressman being asked, and he's like, you know, my grandma or someone taught me that Israel was, you know, the chosen land or the moral land or whatever. It's like, that is the literal basis that U.S. politicians are deciding whether or not to allocate tax dollars, or more consequently, determine whether or not there's U.S. involvement in a imminent war with Iran, which we're still on the fucking potential edge of. And it's like, so Candace Owens, in her own maladaptive way, fulfills an important role. And you, in your own, what I would regard as maladaptive way, fulfills a role.
Okay.
And I pull the strings and orchestrate the whole thing on behalf of enlightened centrism.
How do we tie in at the end?
I was making it. It was a very bold claim.
Oh, we were trying to. Oh, okay. Hoping it.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to poke you on one thing. Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna go full autism mode. Ready?
No better mode.
Hold on. Would you agree broadly with the statement that when humans are communicating with each other, there's always some level, some degree of normativity in the statements that we make to each other? Like, even if I say something like, the car is back from the shop, that just because I chose to utter those words, I think there's some utility, some goodness I'm providing, some benefit in you hearing the information, and there's something you can do to deploy this information in a useful way. There's some degree of normativity baked in almost everything we say.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
All truth is, I ascribe to my understanding of pragmatism, which is Jordan Peterson's squirrely way of comparing truth to utility. So yeah, and utility is ultimately subjective.
Okay.
It's transjective, but go
I'm walking you somewhere because I don't like the statement you made that Candace Owens says true things. Okay.
Okay.
And I'm going to use this example, and here's the macro argument I'm trying to justify. I don't think you can say, I don't know if I would consider a thing true if it's part of a broader context that is not true. I think it becomes meaningless, or I think that we have to be very careful when we take apart those statements. So this will be my example, okay? If I ask you, like, do you agree with this statement? Okay, and I were to say, like, killing, and that's it, right? I imagine that you wouldn't have an opinion on this because it's just a word, right?
I think this guy's probably autistic.
Sure, okay.
But
Let's say
continue.
that I say that killing is bad. Would you agree with this statement?
Generally.
Okay. What if I say killing is bad when you do it in self-defense? I imagine you'd have a much bigger problem with that statement.
Generally not. Generally not.
What if I say killing is bad when you do it in self-defense while you're robbing someone?
So I need to understand more.
Sorry. Okay. That's
what I would say.
Sure. I think that the issue is that killing or killing is bad is a part of all of these statements, but if you're picking out only a part of it, man, the overall message that you're conveying can change really dramatically, such that citing the underlying fact, however true it may be, is the truthiness of that fact is almost irrelevant because of the way that it's being utilized in a particular argument.
Sure. You can say things that are like propositionally true, knowing that they will cause the other person to think of something that's
untrue.
Wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
True. Okay.
Yeah. Like the extreme example is like you can say there's this guy and he slept with a child. It's like, okay, well, if that guy is the child's parent and the parent came into his bed after he had a nightmare when he was 2 years old, it's like, okay, you've said something that's technically true with knowing that it's going to convey a lie.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Right. I trolled, I think a bunch of conservatives had some weird thoughts about me and kids. I don't know why. And I tweeted out that I had indeed fucked a 16-year-old in like 2005. I'm talking about my high school girlfriend. I was 16 as well. Right. This is true, but like you can take a thing. Yeah. Right. The only reason I say this is because, so this is another issue that I run into, is that when people say somebody says some things that are true or false, on a human level, we're really generally just looking at the overall message, and it's pretty rare that people are picking out small things from that message. And if somebody says that they say some true things and some problematic things, they're not thinking, okay, this guy rejects Candace's conclusion, but he accepts some underlying facts. People are actually thinking, okay, he only accepts about 70% of Candace's conclusion. One of these statements of accepting some underlying propositions but wholly rejecting the conclusion is way different than accepting the conclusion about 70%. Would you agree with that?
Then accepting... Say it again.
That like there's a huge difference between saying like if I were to say this statement, in some ways Hitler was a good guy, your mind isn't thinking, and that statement is objectively true. If we were to dive into all the things that he's done in his life, we can find some good things, right? But if you say, okay, hold on, when Destiny says Hitler's a good guy, I agree with some things that he says, and I disagree with other things. People aren't thinking that you've torn apart, you're rejecting the conclusion and you're agreeing with some underlying propositions. They're thinking you're agreeing with the conclusion about 60, 70% of the time. And those are meaningfully different things. Does that make sense? Or do you want me to say that one more time? Sorry.
I think I'm following, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I guess continue.
So what I'm saying is that I feel like, yeah, go ahead.
When I say Candace Owens says true things,
mm-hmm.
like specifically I'm referring to, like, what's his name? Solomon Morel or whatever. Is like, this Polish Ashkenazi Jew, I think, or I guess Ashkenazi is only from Russia, but Polish Jew who, after World War II, was like the head of a concentration camp against Germans, and then he fled to Israel, and they basically protected him. And the Polish tried to extradite him for war crimes, and it's like, okay, that's it. I looked it up on Wikipedia,
mm-hmm.
Like, okay, this seems like a historical. She's not pulling this out of thin air. And my concern is then, okay, if normal people who are not Nazis, and I'm not saying Candace Owens is Nazi, but if normal people who are not so mentally degraded and delusional to have problems with Jewish people as a race, because there's a fundamental difference between Judaism, the religion, which can be and is fundamentally at the end of the day separate from Judaism or Jewishness as a race, and all of the autistic Zoomer Nazis are the ones who have problems with Jewish people as a race, which is insane. But like, if people who are not like, hey, yes, all religions should be criticized, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, all that, if those people are not the ones pointing out like, yes, Solomon Morell's a real person, this is not something we should like, cover up or whatever, then the only people who are in possession of this particular truth are now the radicals.
Which is a problem. I agree. I agree.
And it makes them seem more credible than they would otherwise had normal people just been more like, of course we're not afraid of the truth. Yes, this is a real thing. And it's indicative of the truth, which is Israel is deserving of criticism, just like all secular countries, fundamentally.
Yeah, I agree with that. But what I'm saying is there has to be an extra careful attention paid to the rejecting of the conclusion, because people don't hear you rejecting the conclusion when you say some of the things they say are true. What they hear is a percentage acceptance of the conclusion. That there's a huge distinction between these two things. So, for instance, let's say that I told you I know a guy who can predict. Jesus Christ. If I lock him in a room, I know a guy who can predict with 50-50 accuracy whether or not it's going to be daytime or nighttime outside, right? Would you say that guy is correct?
You said 50% accuracy?
Yeah, 50% accuracy. Would you say, yeah, he's correct some of the time? He's correct half the time.
I guess depends on the time of day.
But it's chance. He's flipping
or
a
if
coin.
If he pulls a card from a deck, it's either red or yellow, or red or black.
Yeah, red or black. Yeah, and he's right 50% of the time. Are you giving this guy credit as a truthsayer sometimes?
No, I would say, why did someone just make that statement? That sounds like something an autistic person would say, and I'd like to know what point they're making, because every statement is made in the context of some motivation for making the statement.
Sure, I agree with you 1,000,000%. But that would be my worry then with like Candace Owens stuff. That when I looked at, or at least some of her recent stuff, I think I watched, to be fair, I've only watched one full video and then I've seen a ton of bizarro Twitter clips. But it looks like she's been, and I'd say she's been on probably for over a couple years now, on some crazy anti-Semitic binge. So every single fact that she's been digging up over the past 2 years has just been to find ways to show that like Jews are like controlling society, doing evil shit. So even if she does propositionally, proffer some things that are true, I would never say, Candace is right about some things, because I don't think she's right about anything. She might utter facts or statements that are true, but it's always in service of her ending like anti-Semitic Nazi goal. So whatever is
Candace Owens is an anti-Semitic Nazi. Do you think that's
absolutely. More so than most people blatantly are. I don't know if it's because she's black, she can get away with it like Kanye did, but yeah, I think or at least to be fair, just from the things that I've seen posted of her, and then some of the long form content I've watched, she seems to be very obsessed about certain Jewish conspiracies, though, that I've only ever seen given in Nazi circles. I think just today I saw
people could say the same thing about you, like with what you said about Palestinians or something like that, if they only saw the worst clips and then one full video.
That's true, but then if you were to ask me something very explicit, I would never dance around the question. I'd give you a complete and total upfront and honest answer, number one. And number two, you can find plenty of video evidence to the contrary.
I've watched enough Canada. She is a...
Like today, I think I just saw she was doing the ADL trope, where that first guy, there was some black guy or something that got exonerated, and people and people try to rewrite the story.
What is your Well, see, I don't even want to get into this,
sure.
Especially after that's why I was a fucking Nazi.
Yeah,
it's like you said. I would never say that Candace Owens is right about anything.
Not with just that. No, I would have qualified that statement way more.
Okay, and look, fair enough. That's, I guess, I'm not saying, nothing I'm saying here is to convince you that I'm right or versus. It's like I'm just outlining my perception of things. It's like that's your strategy, and if you think that the way to push back against radicals is to, even if they say something that's like objectively true. On like some specific historical fact, if someone asks you, like yes or no, Candace Owens says some true things. and you say no, it's like, okay, that's one strategy, and we'll see how.
Sure, but I wouldn't.
My thing, I have
Yeah.
the opposite inclination of like, of course she's. There is almost nothing, like you said, the Hitler thing. It's like, well, okay, Hitler loved dogs, whatever. It's like that's the archetypal example, whatever. Stalin was against wealth inequality, right?
Sure.
It's like my first instinct is to immediately validate whatever true things an extreme person is being said, so that their guard goes down, and I can like, of course. Are there all these things that Israel does wrong? It's like, yeah, obviously. And anyone who says otherwise is gaslighting you. And then once people are like, okay, cool, I can trust this guy, I'd be like, yeah, but you understand that there's a fundamental difference between Jewish ethnicity and Judaism, right? Because they're not going to accept that message from anyone unless they're at least like, okay, at minimum, you have to agree that Candace Owens said some true things sometimes. And you're saying, well, no. And it's like, okay, I think that makes it difficult to create the inroads that.
I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that like it's the same thing
forward.
as like what I was saying before, where like if I'm in front of Dave Rubin, I'm never condemning violence on the left in the presence of this guy, because he's never condemning violence on the right. I'm not going to give that concession to give the appearance of because by doing some true things, I'm actually creating a false impression, even though we're saying things that are true, right? I condemn the violence on my side. Nobody should ever be getting assassinated ever or killed at political rallies in the United States of America. That's horrible, right? But if I offer that up, and I would say that is a true statement, but they on their side refuse to make any of the same concessions, I've created a false impression by uttering a true thing in the mind of the listener, because now they're like, okay, yeah, there are some problems on the left. I'll give Destiny credit for admitting it, but yeah, there are definitely some problems on the left that they need to deal with. I don't want the person to come away thinking that. I want them to hear me screaming and then think, damn, this Destiny guy's kind of unhinged. There's some problem on the left. I wish he'd disavow it. But also, damn, why can't Dave Rubin just say like J6 was bad, or just admit that like they should, right? I would rather them coming away with a negative opinion of both of us than me leaving them with the false impression as a reasonable leftist that we have issues that we need to work on and the right is fine. That's my issue. Oh, another really great example is in the same vein is I made this argument when Assange was leaking stuff about the DNC that selective transparency is actually worse than no transparency, because
that's the same principle
exactly
of saying a technically true thing in service of a lie.
Yeah, because it leads you to the false impression that, like, well, I see bad things here, I don't see any there. These guys must be way worse than these guys. Well, you have no idea. And if you didn't know anything, you'd have a better opinion than if you knew some true things. So that's the broader thing that So like on a purely autistic, discrete level, like if you and I were just talking and you were like, Candace Owens says some true things, I would agree with every single thing you're saying. Not only would I agree with what you're saying, I would also agree that, yeah, you have to own the things she's saying. Otherwise, if you don't ever talk about those things, only the extremists talk about them. Of course, I would agree with that 1,000,000%. But in a broader conversation, I would never be caught dead on a show saying, Candace Owens does say some things that are true, for sure. That's never on its own being there.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess the way I see it is, and this is going to sound condescending or whatever. I don't mean it. I mean it like in the mean way that we were talking about it. It's like, this sounds like Tristana explaining to me why her kit is the best. It's like, it is if you go 20-1 and 5 or whatever. And it depends on the circumstance. Surely you would agree there is a massive chunk of Candace Owens' audience who you are utterly unable to reach because of the way that you approach things, for better or worse. And I'm not necessarily
probably, yeah, for sure, yeah.
That's my point then about why everyone serves enlightened centrism in their own way. Is like,
sure,
you can't reach them, but like I have no problem agreeing with Candace Owens that Antifa and the rioters of BLM did more damage than the January 6ers. That's a precondition for me even being able to talk to Candace Owens' audience. And I would say it's a precondition because it's true. And then the flip side, though, those are for right-wingers. A precondition for talking to the left-wingers is saying, well, of course January 6th is worse than BLM. And it's like, this goes down to then what is fundamentally true. It's like, it's all utility. It's like, what are you trying to achieve by saying anything?
Okay.
And that was the summary of my video that ended with me calling you autistic.
Sure. I can kind of understand what you're saying there, yeah.
Cool. Anything else in your mind before I head out here in a few minutes?
No, I think that's about it, yeah.
The next champion spotlight is the Candace Owens. I called her the Dark Templar.
Jesus, that's pretty... That's not even a League of Legends champion.
Well, no, none of, I make up all the names. Jordan Peterson's the hammer. You're the master debater.
You're right. I'm so
Peterson's the hammer
sorry.
about
Hold on. My bad. You did a thing. I don't think you really do you know what StarCraft is?
Yes, I know it's StarCraft.
In StarCraft 2, there's a unit called Dark Templar, and it sounded like you named it after that unit, but you didn't. You just, I understand now. I'm sorry.
No. And I called her Dark Templar because she's engaging in the dark side of things.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what other reason.
Because she's black.
Autistic. Only an autistic person would make that connection, surely.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Okay. Appreciate the conversation. I am not a Nazi for what it's worth, and I feel like having to say that makes you.
You're good. All right.
Less believable. But no. Appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. If you want roles or whatever, my Discord, if you want to hop in a chat, just feel free to shoot me a message and yeah. Have fun. Be careful.
Appreciate it.
Stay safe. Bye.
Godspeed. Peace.
Wow. Wowzers. What a wowzers combo. That was cute. Okay. All right. Listen, tomorrow I'm going to wake up early. It's going to be a whole new day. It's going to be amazing. I promise. I love you all very much. Stay safe. Be careful.